I'm taking it.
He should be.
I think he is, yeah, I think it's the house on the very first house on like Davis Drive, on the other side. That is correct.
Brunswick-Glynn County Joint Water and Sewer Commission meeting for September 21st, 2017 will come to order. Mr. Copeland will give us an invocation, and then I'll lead us in the pledge. You can all stand.
You will bow your heads with me, please. Lord, we're meeting today to conduct matters of the Brunswick-Glynn County Joint Water Sewer System. Please guide our hearts and our minds in the spirit of fairness, right thought and speech. Impart your supreme wisdom upon our activities so that we may successfully guide JWSC in accomplishing its mission of providing quality water and sewer service to all the citizens of Glynn County in accordance with the federal, state law, local laws and regulations. We thank you for being our source of guidance today. In the precious name of Jesus Christ we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Gentlemen, would you make sure your mic is on? Okay, do anyone sign up for public comment? Okay. We don't have but one committee, if I remember correctly. None of the other committees have met. So that was the Finance Committee. We talked on a lot of subjects, and I'm hesitant right now because I'm looking for the agenda so I can go do it. Most of it will be covered in today's meeting. Okay. So, one of the things that we discussed was the sanitary sewer flow monitoring RFP. That will be discussed for decision at that time. We talked about the water production report, which we'll go over today. We talked about the FEMA reimbursement plan and overtime, which is another subject we'll talk about today. We talked about the tentative calendar for a bond issuance. We're not going to talk about that today, but in looking at our long-range needs, we are going to have to go out and get bonds to fix Academy Creek and Dunbar Creek. And so we're in the implementation stage, figuring out how that whole process is going to work. Then we're going to talk about the current status of the enterprise implementation, the audit status, and then we'll have the month financial reports. So that's about all we did in the Finance Committee, and a lot of it we covered today. The first item for approval is the minutes from the 17th of August and the executive session minutes from the 17th of August. So if you will please look at the minutes for the 17th of August in which you're satisfied that there are no changes or that you recommend changes be made. If someone please present a motion.
I make a motion to accept the minutes from August 17, 2017 regular meeting. No changes.
Second.
Any questions, commissioners, or comments? Okay, there are none. All those in favor of accepting the August 17th minutes, please raise your right hand. Okay. The executive session minutes was are before you now. There's accept the motion to accept the executive session minutes.
I make a motion to accept the executive session minutes of the same 17th.
Second.
All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay. Now we're to the minutes of the 24th, which is, we had just an executive session primarily.
Motion to accept the minutes of the executive session for August 24th.
Second.
Second, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. All right, minutes are accepted. Okay. The sanitary sewer flow monitoring RFP award.
Good afternoon. Today we have before you, we conducted an RFP for sanitary sewer flow monitoring. A few months back, we had a presentation, I believe it was either in the full commission or facilities meeting regarding this project. This project is going to be specific to St. Simons Island, and the purpose of what we're trying to do is measure the amount of stormwater inflow and infiltration that's coming into the system. We have some maps here, and they're also in your packets of the locations that we plan on monitoring. There's also kind of a brief description of what the project will entail. So it'll be system flow metering, it'll also be rainfall monitoring and groundwater gauging. In your packets also, you'll see the evaluation scores for the 5 firms that we received proposals for, and the criteria that we evaluated by. And so one of the things that we were discussing yesterday, identifying where we have the problem areas is one of the steps to addressing it. If you'll recall, we had approximately $1 million in last year's budget to address manhole rehab, grouting, and other things to help tighten up our pipes. And so what this is another way to identify in the St. Simons Island basins maybe where some of our bigger issues are and help us set priorities on where that next bit of funding should go to address those issues.
Now, what is the technology they're going to use?
I don't know the brand name of the flow monitors, but it's a ISCO. Is it ISCO? I know that was one of the ones we had approved for them because we gave them 2 or 3 different kinds that they could use.
Okay.
Is this gonna, when they monitor the flow, are they gonna monitor the flow of the basin? So we're just only gonna get an average general idea, which is then gonna force us to go to additional monitoring to kind of tighten up the areas?
Not exactly. What it's gonna do is you'll get a data logger that'll give you blow by blow, minute by minute kind of flow tracking.
Right.
We'll overlay that with rainfall coming down and see what our response is in the basin to various events and various rainfall. With that, they'll take that and look at the overall basin footage to figure out, to get it into a term, a rainwater dependent index that more or less will allow us to compare apples to apples from one basin to the other and tell us which basins will give us the best bang for our buck as we go back and spend money to do smoke testing and other assessment techniques to figure out where the worst problems are, and then plug our money in to do it. The additional flow monitoring, now we've talked about going into sub-basins to monitor that, to actually generate a quantitative number of the amount of infiltration we eliminate, the money we invest after we put the money back into the system. But right now, that's not part of the program. What this will do is tell us where to invest the money to reduce the inflow and infiltration. And as a reminder, one of the reasons this is pretty critical is because right now, the Dunbar Creek, just as background, the Dunbar Creek wastewater treatment plant is probably running half the normal concentration of nutrients that you would expect with normal wastewater. Meaning, we've got enough dilution effect, that's what the numbers come down to. And talking to them about renewing the permit, and we're certainly in the midst of doing some upgrades to the Dunbar Creek plant. We get the bond, we've done the assessment, we get the bond issued, and we do the work to fix the plant of the things that need to be adjusted and repaired, in some cases upgraded. We'll actually have a plant that can treat 5 million gallons per day, but our permit currently is for 4 million gallons, meaning we're not supposed to be routinely running more than 4 million. Having talked to the folks at the agencies, one of the things they don't like to do is permit for more capacity at the treatment plants if there's a substantial I&I problem. So that's kind of driving us to be real focused in on this I&I issue. If we can reduce that, we get more attention when it comes time to get the permit. But they're going to be looking to us to be making some serious improvement on our I&I issues on island.
Well, I agree that the I&I, we have to reduce it. My question more goes along the line of, is this 300,000, we're going to monitor basins. A basin could be a broad spectrum of pipes that drain into this basin, right? So will this identify those pipes in this basin, or will this just give us basins and then we have to do further?
The latter part.
We're going to have to do.
This is going to tell us, okay, for this basin served by this particular pump station area, this is the overall I&I, or this is how much this area of pipes, as you call it, reacts to a storm event of 1 inch, 2 inches, or 3 inches, so we know what's going on there. We know how much pipe we got there, and so again, it'll give us a kind of like an index of which ones have the most pipe problems. For us then to go back and focus on doing smoke testing or TV inspections or whatever we got to do to really, dial down on where we got to do the upgrades and repairs.
We'll establish a priority.
A priority, a system of prioritization.
Okay. I mean, I understand that we couldn't do that just by trying to trend and statistically follow the run times of the pumps.
You can, it's not an exact measure, it's not like this would be. Potentially you could, it wouldn't be as accurate, but I think, you may be able to put something like that together. And more or less,
The only thing we're using the run times is if you had an inefficient pump, it may run longer without
Oh, that's
pumping
true,
more
too.
water.
that I didn't take that into account.
But I would assume if that were the case, that if you have multiple pumps, that would show up because the other pumps aren't doing the same
We'll
performance.
give you an order back. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Was flow monitoring, Todd, was flow monitoring part of the consent order?
Yes.
It was, aside from putting the meters in.
Correct.
Okay, so this is a requirement.
And it'll be a nice progress when we get the next update that shows that we started this program. But like you said, it could
I
lead
thought
to
we just
more.
got ahead of everything.
And we also, I don't have the actual details of the proposals, but they actually did give us line item pricing. So if at some point we wanted to extend and add more gauges or more locations, we've got that line item pricing that we could take advantage of, and we know how much more it was gonna cost us.
Well, I'd be kind of curious, if we get a couple of rains while they're monitoring, you might get some initial data right from the get-go. Can you modify it and say, let's back up in the basin somewhat, because now that we know we're having
How well it
issues.
correlates.
And this one is, I didn't mention this too, if I did, I'll repeat it again. This is only a 3-month study, and initially, in a lot of the proposals that we received, they wanted us to do a 6-month study, which would have been more money. So also, we were trying to kind of keep it tighter so we don't spend as much money, because we think it's going to be pretty quick. We find out where the problems are.
What happens if it doesn't rain during that 3 months? Well, I'm getting heavy rain. We're gonna be at the same spot we were before?
Pardon?
If it doesn't rain, doesn't have a heavy rainfall during that 3 month
We
period?
don't have rainfall. That's one of the reasons we've got the option to add some more time to it. And I've experienced that, but, you know, the way things are going around here, I think we're in good shape to get some pretty substantial rain events.
All right, so, my question also is, you said that we budgeted $1 million for the last year's budget or this year's budget?
Last year's budget, and we kept it intact for this year as well.
Yeah, it's an annual $1 million.
That
It's
we,
in the budget.
So last year was the
Yeah.
first year, and I probably said it wrong, but we kept it intact for this year as well.
how much did we spend last year for it?
We spent the entire $1 million.
For I&I?
No, what, it's
Manhole.
Compares to the
Manhole
system,
repair.
manholes, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Slip
not
line
really,
Pipes,
And we spent $1 million for manhole repair last year?
and slip lining pipes, things
Yeah.
things that would tighten up the system to prevent I&I.
And this, what, almost $500,000 is gonna be for just to monitor the basin?
To monitor the basins and again, tell us where to best spend money and maybe even big money if we get to that point where we have that luxury.
A lot of the ones that we took care of last year were like the obvious ones. Help me with the locations. There was one that literally like as the tide was coming in,
2002.
yeah, there was so much infiltration there. It was kind of obvious. You didn't necessarily need to put a gauge on that. And then what was the one that was there? Is it Arnold Road where it comes into Demery, or is that the one?
That's it, that's
Yeah.
2002.
So. Those are real obvious.
And you feel the 3 months is better than the 6 months, I mean, as far as monitoring?
I mean, you know, you'd love to have 6 months to give yourselves a higher probability of having those rain events you're referring to there. But in reality, if you get even 1 or 2 good events, you know, an inch or better,
Right.
you've got pretty good data on how your system's reacting. The more time, the more events you can get. It's just more statistics to help you refine that analysis. But you get pretty good numbers after a 1 inch or 2 inch rain.
Is it significant that the basins are isolated as to what kind of repairs that we really need, or do we need to monitor?
All this is going to do is set us up for priorities of where we need to focus our attention. Through the process of doing smoke testing, TV inspections, those kind of things, we'll figure out what kind of repairs, because condition of the pipe may lead you to do this, the situation the pipe's in may lead you to do that. You're going to have to be a case by case on pipe by. I'm sorry to give you such a nebulous answer, but that's the way it is.
okay. Do I have a motion to approve the award?
Can I make a motion that the JWSC award the contract for sanitary sewer flow monitoring to Mechanical Entry?
Second.
Second.
Do we have any further questions? Comments?
When are we gonna start it?
Well, technically, this was on the agenda to be approved 2 weeks ago when we had to cancel the meeting. So, I mean, they're ready to start Monday, so.
Where's McKinnon Creek from? What's it located? What's the?
They're based out of Tampa, the crew that'll be working on this, and they've done work for City of Augusta, a couple of towns in North Carolina. So we checked out all their references, and they're one of the top 2 that do this work. The other one on there was Wolpert, and they're kind of well known here in Georgia as well for that work. We had a couple of folks that do work in the Atlanta sewer basins too, but their price tags are pretty high. So.
Have we looked at the calendar to see how the rainfall falls around here before we start this, to see
That-
October, November, December are bad months?
That's actually one of the components of this that'll be in that evaluation. So there'll be a series of graphical representation that they give us as reports. So they use like national weather forecast rainfall data as one of their baselines that they're measuring against.
Is there anything that we should think about, maybe to piggyback on this, that we could do now that would make it so that we could do some of this work ourselves in the future? Maybe there's some equipment we might.
Let me inject on that score, we actually are. Although it's not an immediate piggyback situation. The other part of the consent order was that we add flow monitors to each of the lift stations. Kind of to follow back to what Commissioner Ford said. you know, whether the pumps are inefficient or not, we get an exact measure of the flow coming out of those stations once all those meters are in. We still have a few years left in the program to get all the meters to the stations. Once that's done, we'll be on top of it, can follow it literally month to month. See what we're, you know, if we go out and fix a line, well, how much improvement did we get this month? We'll know.
Thank you.
Oh, we have a second, but we haven't called the vote yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay. Okay, now for the discussion items. Okay, we're gonna talk about the watershed protection plan.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and personnel here. I'm bringing to attention that the BGJWSC is contracting the ISE, Mr. Bertram here with it, to discuss this, the watershed protection plan and how all governments should be involved. And I just want to let you get a little bit more, give you a little bit more clarification on how we should move forward with this. It's just for discussion, we're not talking money just yet, but, you know, we need to be clarified.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioners. Yeah, we just wanted to give you some background, put some things on your radar that's coming up. This is dealing with Academy Creek, and some things just to be thinking about that's coming. So Academy Creek has an NPDES permit, and that permit requires that there's a watershed protection plan. You guys, along with the city and the county, through Stantec in 2010, you guys all cooperated and put together a watershed protection plan. That watershed protection plan was turned into EPD, and comments were received, but it was never finalized. So now with all the things going on in the system and everything, now it's this is kind of an appropriate time to dust off that watershed protection plan and go ahead and get it finalized. But that plan is a little bit dated at this point. So, you know, it was started in 2010, people change, that sort of thing. So what we're wanting to do is to form some kind of working group and bring all the stakeholders back to the table. And it could be as simple as just turning in the same plan, but we think it would warrant a group to really get down into the weeds of what we're talking about doing, and what you guys originally talked about doing, just so that everybody's still on the same plan. And this watershed protection plan is not, you guys were talking about in the pipe type measurements, things like that. This watershed protection plan doesn't deal with what's in the pipe. This deals with the watershed as a whole. So you're checking streams and creeks and tributaries and bayous and all that sort of thing. So you're looking at long-term monitoring, you're looking at best management practices, plans, and things like that to improve the watershed protection, to improve the watershed as a whole over time, and to monitor that watershed and make sure it doesn't go down. So that's really, I didn't want to go into a lot of detail, just other than to say that, hey, this is a report that the city and the county and you guys all come together in 2010 and put this thing together. So now it's time to dust it off, get down into the weeds with a working group, and really make sure everybody's on board before we turn this thing back in.
Okay. What are the elements of the plan?
The plan has major elements of the plan, as far as implications, would have monitoring requirements in it. So you'll be checking for various indicators in the streams and tributaries. You'll be doing biological assessments in the streams.
That becomes the Joint Water Sewer Commission's responsibility?
It's the way this plan, the previous plan that was put together, it was you guys, city and county, so it was everybody coming together. So it would not be you entirely, but you guys would be a part of it.
Well, who funds this monitoring?
That's why we want to get into that one. That's the question. I mean, I can tell you what the previous report says. The previous report does say that a lot of that monitoring can be paid for through various means, and some of those means were you guys, some of those means were the city, and some of it was county, some of it was grant. So there's a whole section of where the funding comes from. But it will come from.
We don't have anything like this in our budget now, that I'm aware of.
I was paying for it out of operating money.
What?
We paid for the last two, county, Southport, and Dunbar out of operating money.
Well, I guess my question would be is, as long as we are monitoring and keeping our discharge within the acceptable tolerances, monitoring the watershed seems kind of more like an environmental state-county issue rather than a joint water issue.
Well, sir, to elaborate on that, they attached it to the permit. So that it gets.
That kind of changes it.
What's the order of magnitude of the cost of a study like this? Maybe the past, previous studies, we have a price tag on that?
Yeah, the study is already done. There are several aspects of the study. In reality, all you really got to do is turn this thing back in for approval. We're recommending, though, that you look back at it, at this, and get everybody back into the mode of we're contributing on this. But, maybe 10, 15,000 would provide enough effort to get everybody back involved. But honestly, you could turn in what you have now. Well, we're recommending, let's go back and look at this thing. This thing was looked at in 2010. There's been a lot of things that changed since then. And we're hoping to pay for any kind of re-examination of this report by maybe taking out some of the monitoring requirements or things like that. We think we've been successful in the past of at least making a good case and at least reducing some of the costs. Some of the cost is not, some of the costs have already been expended by the city and the county also, and we don't know what they've done. So we need to get into, a lot of these things, ordinance revisions, various changes in their procedures, whatever. Some of those things have probably already been done. Sorry to be kind of, I tried to answer the question, but.
Well, it seems to me that we, if the city and the county and the GWSC was involved in putting this district report together some kind of bag. Seems to me that we need to get a copy to the city and to the county. And let's look at those, let the JWSC look at it and see what they all come together at that time. And it's surely you can go through the report and tell what each party is looking to be responsible for and see if there's any issues there, at that point. What we have in hand now, let's just see if there's any issues there. We can get the county, I can talk to somebody in the county and, we can look at. And,
Does this have anything to do with what you do on the regional commission?
no, it doesn't. That's the question. But,
I agree with Mr. Brown.
I just think we need to dust it off.
Yeah, let's take a look at it.
And decide what we want to do.
I think that's what he's proposing, to put all the parties back together again, take a look at it, and make some changes that we have to do, and maybe not. Then we can figure out
How we can get the city to pay for it?
how we'll get the county to pay.
Now, I'm not opposed if y'all got about 15 hours, we can go through this thing paid for.
No, I think
Basically, I just want to make you all aware that this is a intergovernmental type of plan, and that we should share the expense. Simply because I take Southport, for instance. We have a site that we have to monitor that's 6 miles away from the treatment plant. It's in the county. It's in the, it should be the responsibility of the county.
I hope it's in the county.
You know, but
Or somebody else.
everything will count. But I'm just, you know, it was already written earlier that responsibility belongs to the city, the county, and the joint ones. To sum it up, we're just trying to give you some little information on what we're going for.
Do we have the plan electronically?
Excuse me?
Do you have the plan electronically?
We don't have a kind of pre-plan just yet.
We'll have it tomorrow. How about that?
Okay,
We've
okay, Mike,
got it.
you make sure all the commissioners get a copy of it, so we can
We've
look
got
at
a 2010 version with notes all over it and everything else, but we can have this typed up tomorrow to you.
Okay. And, I mean, the staff needs it, but if you can get it so the commissioners will know what it is we're talking about.
Thank you.
Yes, I get it to my engineer, so he'd be able to take a look at it.
Okay. Mr. Junkin, operational agreement.
Only thing I had on that was, Mr. Chairman, was, we're looking at, we had a rate consultant that we've hired this year to help us out, get us a working model of our rate analysis that we could tinker with, and our consultant has been asked to not only get us one that we can work on, but also add an additional piece that you brought to our attention with a fixed O&M cost built into it. The fixed O&M cost would allow us to take the average bill and assign a fixed cost that gives you up to that amount of water based on the average user's rates of use. The problem with all that is that the current operating agreement specifically dictates the components in our billing.
That's
and
correct.
what is fixed and what is variable. The O&M, which is, though a lot of the expenses in this fixed O&M portion we're talking about are considered variable by an accountant possibly, they are not. One of the experiences we all know about is the fact that we're in a community where there's a lot of second, third homes, a lot of tourist rental properties. There is a significant amount of capacity that fluctuates as visitors come and go. That means that sometimes somebody's got an account, they may not be in there, or their renters may not be in that dwelling for a month. We don't get any O&M help for the standby capacity that we have to maintain to allow them to show up in the middle of the night and start using them. To be fair, those folks that have that ability are not paying their full share of the O&M costs because we're still out there doing work, we're still maintaining the system, having it ready for them to walk in the middle of the night and start to use it. But they're not, again, not paying anything. So our thinking is, based on the proposition brought to us, was that we want to be able to charge a certain fixed portion of O&M, which would cover for that. And unfortunately, that's not built into the current operating agreement to allow us to do so. So we're going to put forth a resolution, don't have it today, but put forth a resolution allowing us to make that change and then send that to the city and the county for adoption so that we can do that. And the benefit is, it again helps us spread the cost over folks that are currently not paying their fair share necessarily of the O&M, simply because of the way they, use and operate those dwellings. And the other thing it does for us is because of the seasonal manner in which we get revenues, this will help take out some of the seasonality, levelize our cash flows, and allows for better planning for our expense, our revenues, and thus how to plan for our expenses. So that's where we're going with that. I don't have the language that we want.
I thought, Mr. Brown, didn't you have?
I've got it drafted, it's been drafted for months.
Okay,
And I've
and you were
actually-
gonna run it by the county attorney,
Right, I've already done that as well.
and did he have any problems with it?
No, the way we left it is, if we weren't planning on making any changes anytime soon, at least that was my understanding. So, he's just reviewing it, and I need to run it by the city attorney as well.
Probably not, it's not something that's urgent to do until we get the model back and see what the impacts are. Once we look at the financials and impacts, if we still want to pursue it,
I think we need to make the change, and it's a commission decision to send it forward to the city and the county. But the reason why I think we need to go ahead and untie our hands, so to speak, is that gives us options as we're looking at the rates next year and the things that we're doing. It's not that we would actually do that, because it's still a commission decision on how the rate structure is done, but we would have options, or the staff would have options to present to us without any further action necessary, except the commission accepting the staff's recommendation or directing the staff to a recommendation, and then that could go forward without anything, which is kind of why I thought we were going to go ahead and move that
I
forward.
misunderstood.
Okay, commissioners? Yeah.
Another factor that you consider too is that the bond rating agencies look more favorably on rate structures to recapture more of the cost of the fixed base charges rather than as opposed to variable. And we will be going through that rating process over the next 5 months in getting ready for the bond issue.
Okay, that's correct. One of the problems that we had this last rate structure meeting, when we talked about it in the spring, was that the rate consultant at the time did not want to address different models because we had our hands tied. So that's why I was kind of disappointed in their presentation when we talked about the rates. But this way you can look at it and you can see what is advantageous to the customer base, what is advantageous to JWSC, and you select a rate model that fits best with this community. So that's kind of what I was trying to go for.
Is there a move to untie JWSC's hands?
That's what this would do on
I'm talking about completely, to make it an entity all by itself, rather than just being something that always have to go through the city and county.
no, we're not doing that. We'll always have an operating agreement, from what I
Yeah.
understand.
But is there any move to nullify that operating agreement and that JWSC stand on its own? Since it seems to be, we always have to come back to the city and county all the time.
Well, as long as you have the operating
I
agreement.
understand that part.
But that,
I mean, every time we keep saying that, and basically, if the city or the county says, no, we don't want this rate change or whatever like that, then where are you?
good point.
So, that's just a question.
But that's just one very specific item that
Well, it's been more items than before. I know how JWC started, and I know what we have become now. So that's just a question, something that we need to.
You know, it's probably not a bad discussion to actually have. I would be interested in a discussion like that. Not one way or the other.
Right.
But
I'm just saying.
I'd just like to have a conversation.
If this is, seems to be, not a stumbling block, but a barrier, so to speak, and always be a barrier to keep us from moving where we need to be to assess what's happening in our community, then maybe that's a discussion that we need to talk about, maybe altering the operating agreement, if nothing else.
I would say if we were doing that, maybe rather than trying to hash out here, we schedule a public meeting or a hearing for us to do that at a later date.
But right now, you want to do the rate.
But yeah, I'd really like to get this done just because we know we need it. But yeah, there are times when we have to make more steps, but I'm not sure that the will of the community is such to see us floating on our own. If you know what.
I know what you mean.
Okay,
It would also take a revision to the legislation, enabling legislation, but for which, that would That can be
But
done.
we take that to the legislature anyhow, we're gonna take
Yeah.
stuff to them anyhow.
So,
But,
Uh,
but it's,
but when you go there, if you don't get all the Board of Commissioners from Glenn County behind it, the state delegation is not gonna do anything.
That's
So,
correct.
so
You still
I
have to
would
do
be,
that.
I would zero in on these things, one issue at a time, as comes up, we'll go through it. That's what I'd recommend, because you opened up a can of worms, but it's not gonna get too far. The Board of Commissioners, if the Glenn County Board of Commissioners does not get behind it, then the state delegation is not gonna introduce any, they want all of them, you know, including the city, but I'm telling you, the state delegation is not gonna introduce any legislation to untie, if you wanna call it.
So it's still come back to the Board of Commissioners for the county and the
Yeah.
City Commission,
Yeah.
Board of Commissioners to their support.
Yeah.
But if they made that decision,
Yeah, if the
Well,
city and
let-
county, the city and county could come together and.
Well, maybe we need to talk about that in our
Yeah,
individual
yeah,
council.
yeah, we talk about that, but I'm just telling you,
What? You talk
that,
about it.
we have not got anything. I've
You
seen-
got new
I-
board
I-
commissioners though, so, different from way back when.
Well, you do, but the board, unless the board comes together, I've never seen the state delegation, want to change anything unless they have the full board in agreement to do it.
I mean, the change we're asking for does not require a change in the legislation, is that correct?
Correct.
Oh, it does not, okay.
So the one
The
change
rate
that we're
change.
asking to go forward with,
Right, right.
okay. So, I mean, this was the discussion item, but you have it. Do you all want a separate, where we do a decision brief on going ahead and going forward with this one change? Or can I get a motion now to go ahead and forward this to the county? Are we ready to forward to the county and the city?
Yes, it's already been forwarded to Aaron. I'd like to sit down with Brian and go over it with him, make sure he understands it so that he can explain it to
Okay,
his commission as
then,
well.
so you want to make sure that we tweak it to what the city attorney thinks needs to be in it?
Yes, sir. And I need to follow back up with Aaron as well.
All right, so,
Yes, that's fine,
that's good.
that's fine.
Yeah, and, you know, talking about this item on the agenda, I can't speak for the other commissioners, but my feel is that this would not be a problem if the language can be worked out, you know, with the attorneys, they came to the board. If this is something that would better position the utility in covering the cost, you know, looking at the bottom line, and also helping them in the bond market or whatever else. That'd be all part of it. I mean, if it's a technicality we have to go through because of an intergovernmental agreement, they can recognize that in a heartbeat, and they can deal with it. Would be my guess.
Any further discussion, questions? Next, we have the ARCO grant update.
where we're at, Mr. Chairman, we're still, lost some traction on that. We invited the folks that do the STEP technology to come in and give us an idea of what it would take to do STEP technology, which we think is a workable solution to get a lot more of that community serviced with the grant monies that we've been talking about. The grants we've talked about is $750,000 plus a 10% matching fund, which would put us at $825 for the total grant. The thought being that the STEP systems allow for kind of a hybrid between septic tanks and a normal low-pressure sewer pump system. It looks like for $5,000 to $6,000 a household, depending on whether their septic tank is reusable or not. We could do the households that are there, and for $750,000, probably half the system could be done in that, or half the neighborhood could be done with that technology. As a comparison, we had the E1 folks that do low pressure grinder pumps come in and looked at the options they had there to see what was available. what their cost and benefit pluses and minuses were. I'm personally waiting to see a kind of an overall budget or a real high-level conceptual budget from the STEP folks to see what that would do, because the grinder folks were saying more like about 10 grand a household to get the grinder pump systems in and do all the piping and that kind of thing. So I think the STEP system would be a better one. In either event, in the case of the STEP system, one of the things we'd be looking at is long-term maintenance and how we built that in as a additional maintenance fee for those folks on their monthly bills, that we then in turn take that money and through contract with the individual property owners take care of their assets. Because again, those are private assets once it separates from the common sources. But right now, we're still at the very, very high levels of conceptual analysis on which way to go. We're talking to them, but we'd like to see this work out in such a way that we get the maximum number of houses served. Our primary focus initially is going to be the owner-occupied residences first. Our concept is to leave connection points for any of the rented properties, so the folks, landlords that own properties there can, out of their pocket, bring up their properties, unless they're forced to be, well, in any event, they would still pay for it, because those are in essence a business,
That's, yeah.
which helps, since there's only about 45% of the homes are owner-occupied.
Okay,
The only question I have is, the step systems would require that the current septic tanks be functional.
No,
And-
not entirely. What I said was, depending on the condition of the current septic tanks, you can save some money if they're in good enough shape
To reuse them.
to reuse them. But if
Would the
they're not-
owners be responsible, with step system, their solids stay on site and on a regular basis have to be pumped out?
They had to be pumped out, which most septic tanks do. The solids would still be processed just like a traditional septic tank. The bacteria would chew it up and whatnot, and it would go away more or less. So yes, as time goes on, it will probably be a once every 5 years need to go in and pump those tanks out. Again, that's part of the maintenance fee to take care of the eventual pump outs, but also to take care of the pump that takes the liquids that's there. And
Because E1 system, the solids would go.
yeah, E1's liquid and solid, everything goes.
Has E1 given you, because that would be the comparison, is what is the life of an E1 pump compared to the life of a step pump
The guys-
plus the maintenance, the pump out costs?
The guys selling the step system said for $50, they'll give us a 5-year guarantee on each pump. For another $50 per system, per unit, they'll give us a 10-year guarantee. I want to say, what did our E1 folks tell us? Was it a 5-year?
5 to
Is
7.
anybody-
I think it was 5 to 7.
5 to 7, so they're, and that's kind of understandable, because with a grinder pump, you're chewing up solids and that kind of thing, it's a little more difficult. With the step system, you're separating the solids, and you have the liquids filtered off, so that you're basically just pumping,
Black water.
gray water through what is in essence a small well pump, about this big. Fits in. The replacement cost on a E1 is, I think, about $3,000-4,000. The replacement cost on one of the step systems, little liquid pumps, is about $400.
So how much would the grant money actually fund? Would it fund the entire installation up to the people's house, or would the people actually have to provide the power to the tank and to the pump?
As far as I know, it's going to be everything, because this is a CDBG eligible area.
Now, do the residents have to pay in, or
Pardon?
either way you go?
Yeah, the only expense they'll have is paying their monthly bill at that point. They'll pick up the sewer charges, and if we work it out whatever this maintenance fee, a couple of bucks a month or something to cover the long-term upkeep of the pumps, and then we do the step system, the periodic pumping for maintenance of the septic tank.
I heard you mention like $10,000,
$10,000, that's for the E1s, the grinder pump systems, to be installed on a per household basis.
but with the grant and the matching money would take care of that,
Yes, sir, it
not
would.
the individual one.
No, none of this was, I didn't mean for any of this to be on the homeowner except for their normal utility bill and whatever the maintenance fee comes to per month. The way I'm looking at it, the maintenance fee would be higher for the E1s, just because the replacement of those pumps, and they do wear out, would be higher over time.
Well, we had a discussion in the recent past about step systems, and one of the comments I thought I heard was, we didn't have anybody to maintain them.
That is a concern, but what I'm really seeing here is, and the bigger concern at the time when we were talking about the peninsula was the fact that those were clearly private assets. And we've had the discussions, we're not supposed to be working on private assets. What we would do in this situation, we collect the maintenance charges for the monthly bills. As long as those are being paid, we would have to contract a third party. We would just more or less be the go-between. Mr. Property owner, hand me your, whatever it is, $2, $4 a month. Mr. Contractor, here you go. These folks should be taken care of. So we'd have to work that out.
But that would
would not be us.
But that would still be JWSC property though.
No, the assets that, if I understand law, we can't own. It's only public where there's multiple property owners using an asset. For the piece that only serves a particular property or parcel, that's private. Am I correct?
Yes.
So the only thing we'd be that JWSC would be maintaining is the 2-inch lines
The
that
carrier-
go up to the property
The
line.
carrier line
Okay.
that the property owner's discharge line ties back to.
Now, I know you said there'll be no cost to the property owner or whatever.
Not for the installation.
What about the neck fee and all that stuff? I mean,
No, sir.
because basically the grant's gonna take care of all that.
Yes, sir.
And you was talking about earlier, you said the feasibility, you don't know whether it's good for a step program or it's good for the other program. So you was talking,
Yeah, we're doing
decide which one's gonna be
we
better.
wanted to get the overall life cycle analysis of
Right.
which one would work out best for operation.
You said one of them does 40%. And
Sir?
you said one of them, I can't remember exactly which one you said, will only take care of 40% of the.
Oh, but either, they both, it's the same. What I was saying about 40%, I believe our understanding was in the rough survey that's been done, we were gonna have to get some help to, refine the survey. But about 40-45% of the homes in our code are owner-occupied homes.
Okay.
So we're not gonna worry with all those other homes that are being rented out to folks. That's a business, that's not.
Which means you're not gonna worry about it, right?
They're businesses. When you rent out a property, it's a business. For the folks that own their homes, I'd be contributing money to, we would be contributing a grant to a
The
business.
business, understand? But they're still in the area, so what's gonna happen to them?
We're gonna have a connection point for each household at the main,
Right.
and provide them contact information to the folks doing the installations. If they wanna, invest the part for the private side of it, they can do so at that time.
And you'll have a contracted price for them, or?
Yeah, they'll get the same price we do.
Okay. And it
I mean,
sounds,
it's not that I don't care about that, it's not impacted by our grant. The way we're gonna expend the money wouldn't be impacted by their being there.
so you've made the decision step system's the way to go now?
No, I didn't say. No, we want to look at both to see what the long.
Oh, okay, I thought you had
life
already done
cycle- That's
both.
why we're inviting the E1 folks in.
Okay.
We haven't gotten any of the final budget numbers, so I mean, some of the guys are gonna, after all the good numbers they gave us, they may come back with a budgetary price that's much bigger than the one they talked about when we were.
What are you using for a life cycle?
Right now, I would guess about a 20-year or maybe a 30-year life cycle. Although the warranties, I know the warranties are different for each one.
Well, yeah, I know. I think the longer we go on the life cycle,
Better?
the better. I think maybe 50 is too much, but 30 to 50.
It won't none of us be around.
Yeah, we'll take that tax on the bus.
It's the long view.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions, gentlemen? We're to the water production report. Did we ever,
I don't have the graph in my possession at this point. What we do have is the same in the packages that you have, commissioners, the raw data that we put into these charts. This is month by month water production and water sales. We're working on a chart that will put those two numbers side by side by month for the last 12 months so that we can identify the trends in usage and production over those months. And this is the pages of the raw data. It's very hard to make any kind of interpretations from these without doing a lot of addition and subtraction. Report is supplied by the Water Production Division. Those would be Donnie Bankston and Bill Simmons. The second page of this is the number of gallons consumed, the number billed, and the dollars in revenue from those billings for the month by month for the past, for the months of the fiscal year ending June 30th, 17. Again, we are working, putting this in graphical format, so it's hopefully more legible than a list of numbers.
So there's, for the month of June, we had 210 million gallons billed.
Yes,
And
sir.
we produced 231, so the differences are unaccounted for or lost water.
No, not necessarily unaccounted for, because this is the gallons that were billed, the usage that goes into our own facilities, the pretreatment plants, or all of our lift stations, that's all metered, but it's not billed revenue. So that has to be factored in. Some of it is water loss, some of it is unbilled for other reasons.
Can we get the accounted for metered water as another line on this? Because it'd be, the good figure to understand is how much we pumped out versus what we did not
What we
account
actually
for.
account for, yes. Yes, and we discussed that yesterday at the commission, or at the
I understand.
committee meeting, and Keisha and I had some discussion about that after the meeting yesterday as well.
So along that same line, that on the second page, the total billed of, I think at the bottom is meter, the bottom of the second page is meter.
Meter.
So the total bill, if you sum all of those months together, then that total would be comparable to, on the first page, the total production second number from the bottom on the right. 2,913,524 gallons production would be a comparison to the sum of the bottom line on the second page.
Yes, sir.
And that, if I ran the numbers right, it looks like that's about 2.4 million at the bottom. So we're about 18% that he's talking about that would be different. A line item that's probably
Aside from-
around 18% that's
Either metered and unbilled
not billed.
or unaccounted for because it's leaks or other things.
And another factor that comes into this also is that the numbers of water produced are measured by the calendar month. The sold numbers are based on a 30-day period, which is an overlap of 2 different months. We read meters every day of the month. Primarily, we have 2 or 3 work days at the end of the month, so we actually read for about 20 days each month. So some of June's production is going to slide into July, and some of July's sales are going to slide into August, so there's a little bit of difference there. But it shouldn't be enough to sway the trends that you would see.
You know, I'd be interested in later knowing some more information about what that 18% would represent.
Yes, sir.
And I'm comparing it with the natural gas system, for example, and the gas system across the country meters, and they have the sales, they know what comes in the pipeline, and the pipelines are reimbursed for the use of the pipeline, it's reimbursed based on cubic feet that are pushed through the pipeline. So it's important to them to know exactly how many cubic feet they're pushing through so they can bill their customers, and they will utilize gas, like for the pumping stations, which use gas-fired turbines to drive the pumps. They don't bill for that, they just take it off the system and utilize it. And so that's just a cost of doing business. And what we're hearing is that maybe we've got an 18% cost of doing business here in the production side, and I'm just curious what those things are in that cost of doing business.
So is that 18% what our cost of doing business, not what's been pushed down to our customers?
From what I'm hearing, our customers are not paying us for that 18% per gallon, but we are having to charge some number per, if we were charging for every gallon,
Right.
and all 18% went to, all 100% went to the customer, well, the rate per gallon may be a little lower, but it's got to be all encompassed,
Right.
so we cover the cost.
We're also talking about some of that leakage or whatever, and also some unrecovered expenses too as well, within the 18%.
And you,
How much do
Yeah,
your plants
right.
use? Do you have a feel for it?
Okay.
How much do your plants use?
As far as water,
Water? Yeah.
we mostly use reused water at Cabin Creek. We use some city water at Dunbar. Very little at Southport.
Very little of that is
Very little.
used
I
in
don't
the
have
plants.
actually a number of months right now, but I can get one.
Yeah, well, that's part of where we use the water for our own purposes.
Yeah, we don't get our sales.
It's not good.
So then, basically, most of this is uncollected,
That's,
in a sense.
right.
It's been used and not really.
Well,
And that,
no, it's not,
it's
it's unbilled.
Unbilled,
It's
yeah,
not-
okay, that's billed.
The term that's used in the audit, or the water audits that we prepare annually is non-revenue water. And there are several components that go into this. First of all, there's the measured and billed water. That's the major component of this. There's self-use water for our own purposes. There's a component for fire protection, since we don't know how much water goes out and we don't bill the fire department for the water they use for it. There's a couple of others too. There's water for flushing lines that's accounted for in that. And then there's another factor included in the water loss audit for systematic data errors, meaning some factor for how much the meters may be off. And and there's a default in that for
It's
that.
operational.
And it attempts to that. One of the things we want to do is to design this chart so it gives us the information that we need for that water audit in the detail that it needs for that, and present to the commission the full, or the summary data in that. If you want to see the detailed data, we'll have that available as well.
This is something we need each month and to go through it.
Once this model is built and opened up, it will be a relatively easy process to update that on a regular basis.
Okay. We're gonna talk about the FEMA reimbursement plan.
Yes, sir. We just had our hot wash meeting this morning on the event. During the hurricane, we had, I believe it was 6 or 7 people specifically dedicated to administrative and finance functions of tracking, making sure people were tracking their time correctly, that we were getting all of the receipts that we needed and in the formats that we needed for insurance and FEMA reimbursements. Before the day before we closed for business, we had a meeting with all of the division superintendents and division or sub-unit heads and went through what we needed for everything had to be location specific, how much time you spent there, what vehicles you used, what materials you may have had to have there. So all of that was, there was keeping track of all of that. And our administrative people were trying to get that all, make sure everything was filled out first. We're in the process now of sorting that into the pieces that we need to get the cost for that. We just before this meeting, I got the payroll computations for this pay period, which will have the overtime dollar amounts in that. I didn't open it up before this meeting to see what it was, but we've got that number now, so we can start accumulating all of those numbers into the correct pots and in the formats needed for reimbursement. First of all, Janice will need to get those submitted to our insurance company and then go through the FEMA process. We have a firm that we're using for help in hazard mitigation grants through FEMA. And we have a call with them tomorrow, so we're going to pick their brain a bit in how to present this information, what formats it needs to be in, and how to present to FEMA in the most favorable light to us to try to get the maximum reimbursement possible.
So, FEMA are gonna reimburse us 75%, or they'll reimburse us our whole 100%?
I'm not exactly sure what the final percentage will be, Commissioner. Depends on what costs are allowed and how good our record is and the presentation that we do.
But we had a lot of record keeping built upon our personnel and also the tasks that they would have to do.
Yes, sir.
This was pre and post hurricane?
Yes, yes, sir. We did a much better job of documenting this time as opposed to last year. We learned a lot last year, and we've made a lot of corrections this year, and there's, of course, still going to be room for improvement, as we found out in our hot wash this morning. But we expect a much higher percentage reimbursement in this event than we did during the one last October.
So right now, we don't know exactly.
We don't have a dollar amount or a percentage reimbursement at this point.
In fact, we're still doing repairs.
You're right. I was gonna say that.
Well, my understanding is,
We haven't filed a claim yet, so it's hard to know, we don't even know where.
Yeah, the only thing we've really done is the preliminary damage estimate.
the way FEMA works is the closer to the event that the expenses occur, the better they cover. First 30 days, you get 75% of the stuff that's you can charge. My understanding also was in this event, the state's doing, is it 15 or are they going to full 25 for the first 30 days? Did we talk?
That's
talk-
only
I'm not sure that's
stuff.
from the-
Isn't that all?
I thought it was all expenses for the first 30 days that qualify.
I'm not sure.
But in any event, after that, you know, there's a diminishing level of reimbursement as you get further out from the storm. So it's one of the reasons we're pushing everybody real hard to try to get all these repairs and get all our replacement parts and materials in as quick as we can.
Yeah, the word I got yesterday was that the state was going to pick up of the 15% that they paid Matthew, outside of the 75 that the federal paid, they were going to pick up the 15 and the 10 that Glynn County paid.
So the state's picking up, so we'll get 100% of everything that qualifies
They pick up 425 of everything that,
for the first 30 days.
the first 30 days.
So we're within that range right now, I mean, we're gonna.
Yeah,
So we're gonna.
everything we're doing right now is being approved for that. But it will, after 30 days, where we expend, you know, a little taper off.
Yeah, you know, one thing too, I think I heard Mr. Donnie say was that there was an accurate tracking of man hours expended during the storm, and also the tasks that each person were given during that time. Now, that may help us in the long run too, by getting reimbursed too. If those things are, during the pre-storm, I'm sure there was some pre-positioning of folks and equipment and so forth like that, so I know that's something that should be accepted.
We were real fortunate in that Nisha Salins, I don't see her, but she and John put together forms and a pretty detailed training
Right.
just a day or two before the event occurred. So it was fresh on everybody's mind. Everybody had the forms. We gave people extra materials and reminders about what the details were they were to keep up with on each of their tasks. So I feel like we're going to get, if not 100% of our work qualifies, nearly 100% of what we did will qualify. They did a real good job on the training, by the way.
We tried to impress on all staff involved to document everything,
Right.
everything they did purchase, how much time they spent, where they were, all through the storm event.
Having some on the job financial people constantly reminding us didn't hurt.
Well, I just want to say Jay Sellers did an outstanding job.
They did.
Sure did.
That was very good. On the way he presented everything, but I also like to say, everybody on the team did a great job. Okay, any other further discussion on the payment reimbursement?
Do we have equipment, some significant equipment failures in that? I mean, I heard from last year 700,000 total, and that,
I don't know the numbers, but I know there's enough big items, pump motors, controllers, a variety of other things tied to either physical structures or operating structures that, or operating equipment that were affected by the electrical surges and that kind of thing. That I think we're going to be in the six figures just on the damages during the storm.
Could you give a non-engineer a quick primer on why we have pump failures with electrical surges?
The big thing that happens aside from voltage is surging. And you know, some of you engineers on my staff don't let me tell them wrong. But when you get voltage surges because the lines are swinging, the wires cross, whatever causes those kind of surges in the power as it comes into the stations and to the assets, if you get an over voltage, you can burn up motor windings. If you get, the controllers that we have are 4 to 20 milliamps. They're taking 110 or whatever voltage and tweaking it down to 4 to 20 milliamps to control these processes. So those controllers are real sensitive, and you can, we put on all the surge protectors, protect the motors, protect the controllers, protect the switches, protect the fuses, everything we can do. But there's still going to be, in a storm like that, where wind's shaking all the electrical assets around and causing things to happen, you're going to have those kind of surges occurring that you're just not going to be able to do anything about, and it causes the equipment to burn up, to be damaged. And that was a lot of what we were doing the first day or two, was just struggling to get out there and get all the parts replaced and swap things out, and get things. In some cases, we had to just work around the equipment that was burned up because we didn't have enough spare components, but we worked out most of that.
Now, if the equipment were off, it would have been safe.
You are correct. I was going to get into that when it was my turn.
Can we identify, I suspect we can't identify degradation. We either had to have a failure or not in order to get reimbursement. So maybe they're covering that with a 30-day time period.
Yeah, everything we're doing right now, we're going to get everything back to a point where we've got materials ordered and replaced, and we're collecting the labor and all the parts and materials. I think we'll have all that stuff pretty well knocked out within the 30-day window to get the maximum reimbursement.
We're not at a point in our maintenance program that we know the signatures of the equipment before the storm, and we can meg them now and find out how much degradation has occurred. Because it could have taken a lightning strike. I mean, a surge could have damaged the motor, but the motor's still operating.
I don't
Just
think
didn't burn it out.
the motor I'm talking about, I don't believe it would function. We had to go to the backup pump on that station. That I'm sure about. But as far as the small stuff, it's not degradation. They were done. The fuses got blown, wiring got blown. We'll have to go, we would rebuild those units at a reduced cost as opposed to replacing them. But they lost function, total loss of function.
Now we get to the point where we talk about the failure of our system at that particular time, also generators having backup systems for.
Yes, sir, and I was going to cover all this when it was.
During your time period, okay.
Yes, sir. I've got it listed as one of the things I want to cover for you.
Okay, thank you.
One of
Any
the
other
things,
questions?
one of the things that came up was on talk radio and what have you, a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking. I went and saw what these folks were doing. People were saying, why don't we have a lot more generators, more diesel motors here, that and another. One of the issues that came up that I wasn't aware of was the fuel issue. Is that each one of these pumps has a day tank that has to be refilled, and there has to be an employee that goes there and refills it. And these guys were scrambling, working really long hours to refill the tanks on these and keep them going when we had limited fuel supplies. I think the community has some unrealistic expectations. This was a storm event. God willing, not many of them in our lifetime, but things happen, and I think that the staff did a wonderful job in reacting quickly and efficiently and staying safe the whole time they did it to restore service in a remarkably quick time. So I'd like to thank them for their efforts.
Pass that along.
So, just out of curiosity, from storm in to when we were fully functional again, how many hours?
Wow. Storm into fully functional?
Not maybe 100% of function.
Yeah, but by the time we had everything contained, if the storm was over by, say Monday morning at 8, picking that because the winds were still blowing up until noon that day pretty hard. We started at 8 o'clock Monday. It probably went through, we were doing the last tweaks to the system, actually, Saturday evening. But now we turned everybody loose to go ahead and start. We've got it down to the extreme fringe lift stations that we were trying to work on to get them back functional. We were running back trucks out there to maintain those pieces out on the fringe, so everybody was turned loose to use water at normal rates of usage at noon on Friday. But we worked through till a little before 7 before we stood down the group as a whole. Is that what everybody remembers? And then we had just a handful of people that came in for refueling and stuff that Commissioner Bowman was saying on Sunday, just to make sure everything carried over while we did repairs and picked it up on Monday. We gave everybody, as we could, a little bit of a breather.
Any other questions or comments? We'll move to enterprise implementation.
And the customer information system or billing system with Enterprise has been up and running for just over 2 months now. And as you're all aware, we had some problems with it when it first went live. We've immediately corrected the biggest problems that we found in that, and we've been working through some of them. We've got most of the systems are functioning as designed now. We're still having more individual problems than systematic problems. For instance, somebody's account doesn't balance to exactly what it should, and we're finding that most times there's data error, we're finding very few systematic errors. It's mostly data input error. Somebody doesn't make sure that a rate is changed on a work order or something. So we're working at that. We've requested all of our finance and customer service staff to put together specific lists of things that aren't working correctly or that they have questions on, so that we can determine whether it is a data entry problem that on our end, or if it's a systematic problem within the software. So we can either get that fixed or find workarounds for it if the software is working as designed. We've moved into more of a data verification in our database now. We're going through and making sure that all of the customers' information is correct, all of their account information is correct, that their billing is correct, and making any necessary changes pretty much on an individual basis going forward.
Would you go through the process of approximately how many customers' information that should not have been released may have been released?
I don't know the exact count of bills that were produced and mailed, but I believe it's around 4,000 or 5,000 bills in total that went out before the problem was identified. And I'm only aware of 2 instances where personal information was included on the bill. We haven't gone back through each and every one of those and looked at every bill after that. But once we became aware of the problem, we immediately stopped any bills going out and looked at each and every bill and corrected them on an individual basis before they went out.
Okay. What was our after action once we discovered it? The issue. And is that what caused our lines to get real long and our phone lines to be tied up?
Partially, yes. Partially it was is related to that. Most people were calling because their bills were late, because we suspended them for some period of time. We started checking. So our process for that was the bills would run through the system as the system is set up, and that actually generates an Adobe file that is sent to our printer, and then they print it, stuff it, and mail it for us. So we took that we took that Adobe file and literally looked at every bill within that file, and we were able to use the Adobe software to go in and correct that bill as it was produced by the system, and at the same time go into the system and correct that data in the customer's data fields, so that it was in the proper spaces and would not reappear on the bill. And then once all of those edits to that billing file were completed, it was sent to our printers for mailing.
Commissioners, any questions, comments?
And a lot of the phone calls were because it took a good deal of time to go through those and look at them individually and make those corrections. So bills were going out late, and that was that was probably half of the phone calls that were coming in were because of the bill timing.
But we still haven't gotten all of them yet, or we don't know. It's still kind of open right now.
Well, besides going through all of the billings individually, while some people were doing that, other people were pulling data out of the database and sorting it and going down through and doing searches on those fields where data previously was that should not have been.
Right.
So we may have missed one someplace. I don't think we have, because we've run through that database 3 or 4 times now.
Well, I guess my question is, I'm leading to is, there were a number of people who ended up with bills that were astronomical. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of people were calling.
Well, unfortunately, the change in the billing system also corresponded to a change in the rates. So a lot of people were calling in because their bill was higher this month than before, but it was because of the rates. That was a lot of them. There were some where a payment had been misapplied to a different account and didn't show up on their account. And those are the things that we're correcting on an individual basis now.
Is there a late fee for non-payment?
Not right now, no.
But they're charging each month anyhow.
Not right now.
Well,
There will be, once we get the bulk of everything adjusted for our active customers, that will go into effect again. But until all of our customers.
The question I'm trying to get is, if a customer owes $50 and, let's say, owes $75, they pay $50. So they would continue to pay what they would still continue to owe that $25 on through, or would that constantly start moving up?
If they truly owe the $25, that will stay on their bill, and once we start assessing late fees, a late fee will be applied.
That's why, there's a late fee.
There will be, yes.
There's not one now.
It's not being applied right now because we still have balances, accounts that have balance questions. So we don't want to be applying late charges to people that don't truly have a late charge.
Right.
So we're within probably 2 weeks of starting that account.
So we're trying to figure out how people get billed up into the $1,000 or $600 or $700. That's some of the issues that.
Those are data entry errors, and a lot of what happens with that is when a meter rolls over, meaning the register goes from 9,995,000 gallons, it will roll over to a zero scan, much like your car odometer, and it goes back to 1. If that's not properly put into the system thinks that is 999,000 gallons. And my billing people are supposed to be checking those exceptions. Once in a while, something will slip through. That's human error in the billing area. Well, first of all, it's human error in the meter reading area, because that the software will put a red flag next to a reading where the reading is out of range.
It's almost like the Y2K scare. Almost like the Y2K scare.
Yeah, and those types of errors those are human errors by staff. Sure. It's not software errors, and that involves some training for our folks.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
We do have a couple of other implementations that we're working on. As you may remember, we were participating in a software development group with Harris for the capital planning, project planning they have. We had contacted Harris to begin implementation of that about 3 weeks ago. As we've gone through the implementation process, we've found that some of the enhancements to that software that the development group is working on are not currently in the software. So there is little for us to gain in implementing that right now, so we've put a stop to that. And once those features are available to us, we will revisit bringing that software online. Just before starting September 11th, we switched our time reporting software that we're using with Teamwork Services to a newer version, which even though the computers or phones were offline, when people were putting their time in, it was stored there, so it would automatically be uploaded to the payroll system once they reestablished a connection to the internet. Our previous software didn't do that. If it wasn't connected, you couldn't put in your time. So that assisted to, hopefully to a great extent, in proper recording of people's times during the hurricane. As we were supposed to, during the week of the hurricane, implement a project reporting component in that software where primarily planning and construction folks could go in and allocate their, like the inspectors, for instance, could go and allocate their time to specific jobs that they were going out to inspect, so we can track and cost that time. Again, that was scheduled for the week of the hurricane. It hasn't been rescheduled as yet. The final thing is the use of a software called OpenGov, which we can load our data into, and we showed some to the Finance Committee yesterday, where our numerical data goes in and is put into graphical form so that you can see. For instance, yesterday we looked at the revenues and expenses for the past 5 years in total. And you're able to go into that software and click on various pieces and actually drill down into the software to get details. And those graphs show trends and in expenses and revenues and so on. And this is very much in its fledgling stages, and will be developing more graphical information for the commission. This will produce, we can make this information public to the general public, our customers. It can be made internal for all staff use, or it can be made private for one individual that has a particular set of information that they want to look at. We'll be adding more to that and going through some of the presentation with the commission as we develop that. Audit status. Our auditors were here the week of August 18th through the 22nd doing their field work. When they left on that Friday, they left us a list of about 30 open items that we needed to provide to them. Some very basic, such as providing a copy of the report. Some a little more involved in putting together some analysis of accounts that they were asking for. Because of the storm, I took some time off during that time, or subsequent to that. Francis Wilson has been providing a lot of information to them. We expect to have that wish list, if you will, or list of open items finished up in a week or 10 days. And the audit report issued subsequent to that.
Okay, do we normally have the audit team come and brief the commission?
Yes, sir. They come in, over the past couple of years, they have, yes.
Okay.
And once that's completed, we can have them come back and do the presentation of the completed document.
Any questions on? Go to the end of August. Balance sheet.
When you have in your package is the balance sheet and other financial documents for the first 2 months of the year. And as of August 31st, we got the first being the balance sheet for that period. Items of interest in that are again as in prior months, the accumulation of funds in the bond sinking fund for our interest payment on December 1st, and then upcoming interest and principal payment June 1st of next year. It is about in the middle of the restricted cash accounts. Through August 31st, we've received and have on deposit $1.6 million of SPLOST money that has been received through the county. And those are really my only comments on the balance sheet, unless someone has questions on that.
Our accounts receivable continue to go up.
Yes, sir.
How is our collection effort going?
The executive director has some information on that during his report today.
Okay.
The second page of the report is the combined revenue statement for the first 2 months of this year, and the annual amounts going back to 2014. You see that our year-to-date actual net revenues for 2018 are $1,060,000, or $1,060,000. However, $1.33 million of that is actually capital improvement fees, which are set aside for future capital projects. So our real actual net through the first 2 months is just a few dollars short of $27,000. We take the $1,060,000 minus the $1,033,000. We also have $794,000 of outstanding purchase orders at the end of August. Some of those are, again, our blanket orders for two of the largest are for chlorine and phosphate for the water production facilities. Those total about $132,000. But again, net of the capital improvement fees that are collected, we are, with the purchase orders, we are in a deficit for the first 2 months of the year.
If I could ask you a question, you brought to our attention, back on the balance sheet,
Yes.
you brought to our attention the SPLOST account, 1.126 funds,
Yes, sir.
and I was trying to reconcile that in my head. So that's money that is already spoken for future
Yes,
ongoing work.
that money is spoken for 2 separate projects, yes.
And when will that money be, where's the offset account for that? Has it occurred is it on the balance sheet yet?
That's actually part of where I have capital improvement fees, that should actually be capital improvement fees and grants. And we received $19,000 from GEVA for a grant as well. It's included in that $1,033,000. That label is actually not all inclusive.
I see, so the capital improvement fees of $1,033,000.
That actually includes grants too. Grants and SPLOST.
So that's someone, okay.
No, I'll make that correction on future statements.
Thank you.
After the combined revenue statement, the report of overtime by year from 2014 up to the current year, with a comparison of the year-to-date budget and year-to-date actuals. You'll see that the major item or major area that's over in overtime is the finance area, and that's a direct result of the issues with the rollout of the billing system, which spent a significant amount of time, overtime, working on making sure the bills are going out correctly and fixing other miscellaneous errors.
We're gonna always have this issue with overtime with facility maintenance and with system pumping and maintenance and wastewater. I mean, we'll always have that issue. Overtime, is there any way to fix that?
We actually had quite a long discussion on overtime yesterday, and there were a number of components of that. First, the amount that we pay people to be on call was considered as in the overtime category, and is the callback time for somebody to turn off water or come back for a leak or something like that. There's scheduled overtime when work is done in off hours to accommodate a business's schedule or something like that. And then there's the overtime when a line breaks or something. Right. So, but there is some level of scheduled overtime, particularly in the wastewater treatment area, where people are actually have scheduled overtime where it's more economically beneficial to pay people overtime than it is to hire that next person because of the fringe amounts, the fringe benefits that are associated with that person. The actual hourly rate for overtime is less than the standard rate for the admin employees in cases.
Well, this comes under human resources anyhow, so I get a chance to look at it.
So, and it's a finance committee yesterday, we talked about breaking out those various components of overtime into subcategories.
And let me add, in advance of us having human resources committee, we've got kind of on the boards concepts to try to address at least some of the major overtime issues we've got.
Right.
I know one of the things, particularly you mentioned SP&M, one of the issues that's come to our attention is that the reliability of our SCADA system. A lot of common areas, which means, oh, there's no communications, how do we know if we're not having an overflow? So we get a lot of, we also found out during the storm that our SCADA system had some kind of questionable settings on the alarm status and where the alarms came on and whatnot. So we're making all those adjustments. We're also in our capital plan this year, we're going to be replacing SCADA, not only because DFS has not been a real reliable software or SCADA system, but also because the software or the SCADA systems at the Southport and Academy Creek are long in the tooth. They're about not supported by the folks that originally we bought them from.
Right.
So it's time to get rid of all that stuff. And with those changes, we're going to see a big chunk of that go away.
Right.
There's other things we're going to be looking at to try to carve that down some more, but we're going to address that in a hard way here in the next 12 months.
Okay. All right.
And then the final report in the packages today is the project report as of August 30th, 2017. You're going to see all of the projects that are still open in our systems. We've added a column for the funding source for those. Where there's a blank in there, it's assumed that they would be paid for out of repair and replacement reserve monies. rather than filling in all of that in each column. Partway down the page, you'll see projects number 702 and 703, which are SPLOST-funded projects. And one of those has /debt after it. The total cost of those projects is something around $18 million, and we're receiving $15 million in SPLOST. So some borrowing is going to be necessary for that, and that will probably be included in the bond issuance that we talked about. The Commissioner Elliott mentioned earlier that we discussed in the Finance Committee. We have the cost accumulated to the beginning of the fiscal year, how much we have spent this year, what's still encumbered on the projects, how much we've spent, and what we anticipate the balances to complete those listed projects will be. And if everything were completed as of the end of this month, we would have about $1.3 million left in the repair and replacement reserve. For general projects, it would be about $3.2 million in the capital improvement funds, the bulk of that being within the City of Brunswick district. The capital improvement funds, it has been assumed are to be used in the district in which they're earned. And that probably needs to change. And again, this is the total right now that we're short, minus the cost of the projects, minus what we have in hand for SPLOST is about a $17 million difference. We'll be collecting SPLOST over the next several months, next several years. So in this, we have a lot of needs, but not a lot of money to complete capital projects. Any questions on that?
Commissioners? Thank you, John.
Thank you.
You can get a driver's license. So there's all of these, this myriad of negative consequences to not collecting a social security number. So we have no intention of stopping that, despite the reality that we had made some mistakes regarding how that information got onto the bill. So that situation has been rectified, but moving forward, we will have the controls in place to prevent that information from getting out into the wild. So unless you have any questions, I think that's really the cut and dry answer. Oh, and you missed it. It was so exciting.
Well, I kind of have a question. Does that mean that someone that is illegally in this country could not get a utility bill from us?
That's correct.
Okay.
And we have in place people that don't have social security numbers that are in the country legally need to get a sponsor who does have a social security number.
I think they have social security numbers, just they don't have their own social security number.
Well,
Right,
I
they
mean,
have
that's really kind of where I was going.
Right, they do.
You know, how do we know that they gave us the right social security?
We use a verification system.
A verification system,
Yeah.
we verify it, or does
No,
it?
it's an online utility services is the name of the company, and we can go in and put the social security number in that website, and then we'll verify it against the name and other information that's provided.
Okay.
And there are guidelines, when that comes back, not a match, there are guidelines as to how that's to be handled with the customer.
Okay.
And if I may add, the Joint Water Sewer Commission would be subject to a fine of $3,500 per instance of not collecting this information.
Okay. Further questions? Okay.
Is there any action we take if we find that the social security number is not verifiable?
That's set forth in there's guidelines for using that online utility services. The the service that we use for that verification. They have a set of guidelines, and they put out various trainings, online trainings and written documents for training that go through how to handle that.
We haven't found anybody to do that yet, have we? Man, you don't know that.
Can one person open more than one account?
Can one person open up more than one account? Oh, certainly. You're speaking of a legit.
I'm saying you got a sponsor, open up 10 accounts.
Yeah, sure. That sponsor is going to be on the hook for any charges. Any other questions on that?
We may add that the online utility services that we use for the social security verification also provides a bit of a credit reference for those individuals, because we don't, but we have the capability of reporting to them if somebody skips out on a bill or doesn't pay their bill. So they collect information from the various cell phone companies, gas and electric and so on, and provide a confidence percentage for deposits. If we don't have that within our ordinances, that could be made available.
And regarding the deposits, to encourage me, you've heard me say that we have the most boring channel on YouTube when we upload these videos, but having not reported the comment that was made in the last commission meeting regarding the question about whether we can return deposits for those that have what we consider a good credit history with us. What is it, 36 months of? So nevertheless, that wasn't reported by the media. It was only in the video. Within days of that statement being made, we had people in the lobby asking for their deposit back. So either somebody here leaked the news. No, I do know that people are getting that, and that's good, because these are, in fact, I personally spoke to 3 people, and they were elderly customers that had been with us over 30 years, and their deposit was $75, the old school amount. So that is an offer. That is an option. So we are making that available to those.
Yes, and that's one of the other remaining pieces that we have to implement within the enterprise CIS system, is that we can define they call it a credit rating within the system, but it will flag customers that have had non-payment within the last so many months, and we can establish a set of rules for the software file to determine whether that's the criteria for returning a deposit is met. So we don't have to go customer by customer by customer and check that.
What does that cost us? What's the cost?
Well, it doesn't cost us anything.
Doesn't cost us a dime?
No, it's only the time that it would take to build those rules into the system and get them working.
So speaking of customers, does anybody have any more questions regarding the social security number issue, or shall we talk about customer service? The reality is, when John came on board as our first employee in 2005, late 2005? 2006. John was in the unenviable position of taking everything onto his shoulders as it came along until we did the transition in 2008. And the transfer of responsibilities for customer service officially took place August 14th. And so now I have some responsibility in the front office and continuing the responsibilities with the public information officer, those duties, and then supervising the meter services division, so we can have some fun there. But our failure to meet our customers' needs came to a head July 1st when we changed the billing system. We changed the rates, we changed the online payment portal, we made all of these changes. We changed the billing statement, moved the information around in some form or fashion, pretty much all at the same time. And, sir? Can't change the account numbers. And we were so busy doing the business that we didn't recognize that there wasn't training going out ahead of time to inform people of what was coming. So on August 14th, Mr. Duncan asked me to step up to the front into the customer service area to focus my experience and my attention in doing the best I can to improve our relationship with our customers. So we had spoken, especially in the Public Information and Customer Relations Committee, about the survey results that we've processed, and we're starting to see improvements. It wasn't nearly as dire as I expected to see, because if you follow social media, it looks like that we have no love at all. But the survey results came back rather positive, that people recognize there's some need for improvement, and we're going to start focusing on that. So up to the point of July 1st, or really as of August 14th, we had 4 customer service representatives behind the counter, and then we had Luke Schwalm, our customer service supervisor, behind an office door. So our call volume since 7/1, as we mentioned earlier, increased in no small part to the changes that we had made. Now, anecdotally, you hear all of these, my bill doubled, my bill tripled, and if you're in one of the groups on Facebook, somebody may ask the question, has anybody else seen their bill go up? Well, of course, any rate increase would see that kind of commentary, but we threw so many variables into the mix that our call volume went, it just skyrocketed. We couldn't keep up. On a good day, our call system says that we can handle having 3 to 4 CSRs, customer service reps, taking calls. And when we got to the point where it was 4 to 5 and the number keeps climbing, a lot of calls are going to voicemail. A lot of calls are dropping. I worked for Geico right out of high school for 3 years, and they focus so well on the call volume and when to staff up, when to staff down, if you've ever worked in a call center, you know that's their bread and butter. They do watch those numbers. And we weren't watching those numbers so well. We just sort of gave up in a sense. So we were overwhelmed. We brought in a temp for 2 years. We had a temp up front that was answering calls, the bulk of the calls, in fact, and that wasn't fair to the temp, and it wasn't fair to our customers, because you throw somebody that doesn't know anything about the business into the deep end of the pool. So then you have somebody that doesn't have any knowledge, and you're trying to fill them with knowledge at the same time as they're answering calls, and there wasn't any coaching. Another good thing Geico does, I can listen in on a call now. Luke can listen in on a call, and then we can make notes, and we can go back to the rep and say, listen, I know this is how you explain to this person, but there might be a better way to say it. So we're going to start being proactive and working with the customer service reps to focus on their strengths, and if we have any weaknesses, then we're gonna see if we can hone those to the point where they're manageable. But I moved my desk up from the back. Those of you that have found me as ITJ, I was in the belly of the whale. So now I'm up front in Luke's office, and we put Luke right out front and center with customers being able to interact with him as they come and go. And seemingly at the same time, we moved one of our meter service technicians, Olivia Cummings, over to customer service. So now she's another warm body in customer service handling that volume. And we brought in Tarina Jackson, who started this past Monday, and we poached her from the 911 center. What better person to be able to handle a high volume of calls with people that are upset, people that are grieving, people that are frustrated that their bill has gone up, than somebody that's spent the last, I believe she's been with them for 3 years, taking calls at the 911 center. Pretty handy. What an asset. So we've now staggered start and stop shifts, so we can never have less than 3 available to process payments. That's the ideal. When you walk through the lobby, you should never see less than 3 people processing payments. All reps are also going to take calls between walk-in customers. This one's been a little more difficult to implement because the flow of traffic into the building, I'm encouraging them and really giving that message to Luke to track, handle a customer's payment, walk in, handle a call, walk in, call, walk in, call. Because the calls that are coming in are realistically more important, not important, let me rephrase that, vital to process as the walk-in traffic. Because the guy that's walking in to give you money, he knew walking in that he was going to have to wait to give you money. But the calls that are coming in are oftentimes trouble calls. It's people that are trying to report that there's a sewer backup or there's a main break. For me to let that call go to voicemail is not a good thing at all. So it's a detriment to the cause of providing quality service to our customers. So we're going to stand behind being able to process calls while we're processing payments. There was some resistance at first because historically we haven't enforced that. And in fact, early in the year, John spent a good bit of money upgrading all of the phones on the counter so that they can wear a headset and that they can be able to process those calls with both hands. For those of you that have ever done that before, like I can't even talk with a phone held in my face, or type and do all that. So we took away one obstacle, but we still had the human obstacle. So now we're training them to understand that this is vital. You need to be able to take the calls and process the walk-ins. So that's working so far. And we're seeing the call volume maintain steady. As you can imagine, the variables are still there. We can't get out of our own way, and then thank you, Hurricane Irma. So even though we are making progress, and we bring Torrenta in, Torrenta was actually supposed to start the week before. That's okay because nobody was taking calls for the next week anyway, because we were all somewhere else. But on high volume days, especially on the 1st and the 15th of each month, and depending on where that falls, it may be a day after, maybe a day before, we had, in the process of hiring Torrenta, dragged Lucas Dominguez over for meter services. So you might go through and see a Mexican-American fellow that is literally this tall, and Lucas sits at the desk and handles calls as quiet as a mouse. And most of the time, I didn't even know he was there. Good feedback from the customers, that he has a soft-spoken voice and he's able to clearly communicate what response they're looking for because he's worked in operations. So he's been a meter reader for years. But Lucas is going to come over. This is kind of a fun thing we're going to do on the 1st and the 15th when the call volume is the highest and the walk-in traffic is the highest. We're going to put Lucas behind the locked door in the customer service lobby, that area to the right. There's actually a big area back there that's as big as 2 offices, and we just don't use it fully. So we're going to stage equipment back there. We have a phone dedicated to that cubby hole. We're going to put a computer back there, and Lucas is going to continue taking calls and take the load off the customer service reps so they can process the customers through. Because folks walk in, especially with that's the government paycheck schedule, 1st and 15th. So that's a good plus. We're going to have Lucas and meter services. Obviously, they lost a week, so it may end up being some overtime charges going into catching up on billing. But regardless, as far as what we're doing in customer service, here's another good idea. What would you say if we added 2 credit card terminals at those 2 desks out front? So now if somebody's standing in line and Luke doesn't have somebody sitting with him processing whatever they need to, or not setting up a new customer, Luke can shout out, hey, does anybody have a debit card or a credit card? I can process your payment right here. For security reasons, we can't allow the 2 desks to process cash or checks. But credit cards are fairly benign. As long as he keeps a copy of that receipt, slaps it into a drawer where we're going to lock that, the credit card number doesn't show, it's going to balance it at the end of the night. Now we've just created 2 more customer service reps. So we're making good progress there. So we're going to have a total of 7 staff at peak times that are able to process customers through. And in the process of doing that, we pulled away some of the clerical duties and sent those to the temps in the back. We want them to be able to focus on customer needs, not standing like somebody had observed before a few meetings back where somebody was at the counter processing clerical work, giving the customer the impression that they weren't important enough to get their attention. We've eliminated that. So if somebody's on the counter, they're doing the stuff. Eventually, we're going to have to pepper that clerical work back in because y'all know this call volume is going to dip, and we're going to get to the point where we have to be proactive with customer service. One thing I'd like to do with CityWorks, if we have somebody go out, somebody calls and says, I have a sewer spill, or whatever the case is, back up, and we need to go check their clean out and whatever the case may be, we're going to call them back after the work is completed in CityWorks and say, hey, how was that service? Did we communicate to you what went down? And in order to articulate that, every last one of our customer service reps is going to have some time in the field. We're going to put them on a truck and we're going to allow them to go out and see, because they don't. They, for the most part, have no idea what it looks like to be in a crew truck, to ride around with a vac on. It's just a big vacuum truck. But until you know that, you don't know what VACCON, what it means and what the crew does. So we're going to start putting the CSRs out in the field. We're adding a payment box at the end of the sidewalk that'll very fairly resemble the FedEx and UPS boxes that are on the other little island. That was a great suggestion from a citizen that Vice Chairman Adams brought to me right before the storm. I'm sorry I haven't ordered it. So there's been some other things happening. But we're going to put a payment box there. It's going to say no cash. So if somebody wants to drop a check in that box, if it's raining or if it's difficult to get out of the car and walk to that lock box, you know that lock box at the front of our building was never intended for payments. It's a night drop for the bank. But we use that wisely for people that just want to drop a payment off. But if you know when you come to these meetings or any other day of the week, that parking lot's full, that's a discouragement. We want to encourage people to be able to process their payment. So we're going to put that box at the end and we're going to lock that down and check it a few times a day. I'll soon start recording training videos on the use of the new billing system portal. The billing history portal, referred to as Citizen Access, is something, once again, we haven't promoted, but people are starting to jump into it. You'll be able to pull up your bill and see what your statement is, see what your historical consumption is. And then our online payment portal, known as Paymentus, has some challenges to the customer, so we want to articulate that and let them know how to get in and out. You've heard me say before that things are going to get worse before they get any better, and we're still in that mode. We set a go-live date for all of these changes, really when we're going to kick off moving into just a new mode October 2nd. So the Monday after next, we're gonna have all hands on deck and we're gonna be rocking and rolling. Somebody quoted me saying that in the newspaper. Rocking and rolling. Any questions regarding customer service? Do I speak too fast? Do I need to speed up?
No, I thought it was pretty good.
Thank you very much. Let's talk about, now, Hurricane Irma after action report. My name's first, Mr. Johnson's name is second, and I hope I don't steal your thunder. Can I go through what we went through in the hot wash, or do you?
Yeah, just when we talk about our big picture plan on the assets, I'd like to address that as we go through.
Okay, so I can go right into those numbers that we developed this morning?
Yes.
Okay. So the beautiful thing is, we're starting to do our hot wash, and unbeknownst to most of us in the room, Pam, I guess, had already scheduled the folks from Yancey Caterpillar to come in and talk about generators. And perfect timing. So we made use of them sitting in the room to try to gather some of that, the numerical data. What's the term? Monday armchair quarterbacking that was mentioned earlier. There's a lot of commentary on Facebook. You may have noticed that I've been plenty less engaged in the discussions lately because I didn't have anything that I could give them as definitive answers. Here are your definitive answers. As much as I continued in engaging social media prior to the storm hitting and speaking to the radio stations right after the storm, the $700 Generac you pick up at Home Depot or on the side of the road will never ever power our lift stations. So that needs to be understood by the general public. Now the next statement is, somebody that may have been in the business and is able to go to northerntool.com says, a $10,000 to $15,000 generator ought to work, right? That's very short-sighted and it's not reasonable. So let's talk about the truth. So following the storm surge and the sustained tropical storm force winds that we faced as Hurricane Irma attacked us, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the statement by George Powers that 95% of our community was without power, and 75% of our critical water and sewer assets were without power for 4 days. That was significant. While Hurricane Matthew could have been considered a water outage event because we lost St. Simons as an entire system and had to put out the boil water advisory, Irma put all the focus on sewer. So right now, Kirk's not here to defend these numbers, but y'all back me up or correct me if I say something wrong. So this is what we went over this morning, and then I had to disappear to a family event. But right now we have 20 sanitary sewer pumping stations and water pumping stations that already have a generator permanently installed. That leaves roughly 140 pumping stations that lack generators. Water's covered. Water's covered. Systems pumping and maintenance, the wastewater collection system, just as you would expect, has a big need. Industrial grade generators, and we're talking the big guys, are purchased with an expectation that the asset would be maintainable for a minimum of 20 years, and in some cases up to 40 and 50 years. For those of you that have been in the military, when you go to do the preventive maintenance checks and services, that PMCS on a piece of equipment, and you look at the date tag and it says 1954, that doesn't surprise you because the military maintains things to seemingly last forever. They run them to fail, and until they are worn out. That's something that's not expected from commercial or residential grade generators. Most of the folks that have purchased these $800 units are going to find out after a year or two that the service is not there. It's going to be hard to find parts. You're not going to have this thing for 40 to 50 years. The lifespan depends on proper maintenance and protection from the environment. Everybody knows around here that salt water is the ultimate killer of all equipment. If you've driven your vehicle through the storm surge this past week, the first thought out of your mind was, I need to go wash this off. Then the next thought out of your mind was, but Jay said, don't wash your car. So marine grade coatings are an added cost that are going to be necessary as an investment on this equipment. So believe it or not, we'll talk about this in a minute, the estimate from Yancey, the marine grading or the marinizing of this equipment is more than what the general population believes we should even be spending on these guys. But they're not the ones that are going to have to look at them for 50 years. So we want to know that we're making the proper investment, and it's a sizable capital investment. The generators, the control panels, and all the vital components that would have to be elevated up out of the potential surge area, or they're going to have to be lifted up or they'll be inundated with seawater and fail. Nobody here on the board wants to say that they purchased something and put it at sea level, and then a year later the thing was worthless because it seized up from the being underwater. Plus, storm surge projections indicate a 13-foot minimum required elevation for those located in the floodplain. And I meant to ask, right as that statement was made this morning, well, how many of these units are going to be in the floodplain? Well, Haggerty did that study for us. Good heavens, most of our critical facilities are within the floodplain, so we should count on them getting wet. In December 2016, following lessons learned from Hurricane Matthew, we set up an additional 10 generators at the critical pumping stations. We had 5 additional 100 kilowatt portable generators that were already contracted as emergency rentals through Yancey since Hurricane Matthew, and all were used to the max. I can imagine that's what Kevin was here to talk about this morning, right? How did things go? Things went well with the Yanceys. We received 5 more portable generators, and that number I believe is 6. I got some confirmation by email earlier. We received some 40 kilowatt to 150 kilowatt through resource requests filled with the State Emergency Operations Center, and also communication with local partner organizations. Those were courtesy of McIntosh County, the City of Richmond, Coastal Health District, which they called us. That was a beautiful thing. Alabama Rural Water. Mr. Junkin didn't get real excited about that. And Georgia Pacific. And one of those came from Georgia Rural Water, and I'm not familiar at this time what utility that came from, and it may have just been the GRWA proper. But let's talk the numbers. This is what everybody wants to know. To the camera, purchasing a 100 kilowatt generator, which is by and large the typical that we would install at our pumping stations, will cost $75,000 plus the cost to elevate it on a steel or a concrete pad. And the rough estimate, and these were numbers that were discussed with the Caterpillar folks sitting there in the room, $90,000 average cost. And I would like to have an example to put in your hands right now, but I don't, so we'll develop that. But expect an additional $20,000 per unit to upgrade these units to make them marine grade to ensure that they're going to last more than one storm. We did have inundated generators. We had inundated bypass pumping stations. We had imagine, would you want to drive your truck off the driveway if you got into it and the water was up to the dashboard? That's the condition that some of our assets were in. The water was that high. Annual routine maintenance would then be $3,500 to $4,000 per year, depending on weekly, monthly, or quarterly startups. Automatic transfer switches could be programmed to cycle the generators, but hands-on maintenance would still need to be scheduled. We don't presently have enough of the appropriately trained staff needed to maintain a high volume of generators. So simply buying these doesn't solve the problem. There's many more variables that go into that, and no amount of speculation on the part of the citizens is going to make us feel better about that, because in the end, this is going to generate some capital costs, but we'll see. So quarterly inspection and annual load bank testing, along with diesel fuel polishing, would be required at the cost of as much as $10,000 per station. Where natural gas is available, seems like a reasonable option. We would use that type as primary fuel and have diesel backup fuel cells. If natural gas is turned off, and when I typed that, I was thinking that locally the word was no power or natural gas would be shut off. Georgia Power lets their systems crash. Natural gas has solenoids. They have control valves that would pop the system shut if it went to hit a certain pressure. The smaller diesel fuel cells would require more topping off, and we discussed that earlier. Somebody's going to have to get in a truck and drive around to top off these generators, and what if they can't get there? Then the system's going to go down anyway. Now you have a generator that might have cost you $150,000, and it's just sitting there in the water, not doing anything. So these generators only run so long, and crews would have to be very active in refueling each. And with road blockages from Hurricane Matthew taken into account, we'd have to lean on Public Works and the Department of Transportation staff to clean the roads. That's how the incident command or the National Incident Management System works. Technically, we're not supposed to pull the chainsaws out. We call on our other partners in the Emergency Operations Center and ask for the help. So financing this cost is an option. And I know Mr. Junkin's going to talk about some of this, but the raising, we could raise rates, or we could create a line item on the bill as an option. SPLOST is an option. But a conservative calculation of $20 million capital investment is quite sizable but realistic. That's a scary figure. Add to that the engineering costs, the annual maintenance, and land acquisition that would be needed to put these where they need to go. And how many of our citizens would be excited to have a generator running in their backyard. Another option would be to extend our contract with Yancey Cat to have more portable units on standby. This would allow us to transfer the long-term maintenance onto their shoulders. So they're going to be coming in to check them out on a routine basis. However, the risk associated with emergency rental agreements is the possibility that one storm, such as Hurricane Harvey, sucks up all the assets out of Yancey. If they have so many available that go to the first storm that hits, then is that going to hurt the possibility of us getting those in the next storm, such as Hurricane Irma? There wasn't a lot of time between the two to have those assets transitioned. But staff's going to be considering all capital investment options in the coming weeks, and we discussed this morning, proceeding now with determining the cost to make a short-term decision to extend our contract with Yancey to have more portable generators available should we see another named storm in 2017. Because for one thing, the hurricane season lasts until November 1st, but on the other hand, the hurricanes have no idea what a calendar is. And we're not going to hold them to the November 1st deadline. It's typically a 6-month contract, by the way, covering all of hurricane season, June to November, but Kevin Camella, let me get his name right. Chimella. He's the rental sales representative at Yancey that was here with his team this morning. He's willing to offer us a short-term contract extension to put our utility on a priority list for the remaining of this hurricane season. Once again, there's going to be a cost associated with that, but it would be less expensive than buying even one generator. So, any questions regarding generators? Or Mr. Junkin, do you have anything to add?
All right. I was going to say, we're just doing some back-of-the-envelope calculations. I think we were somewhere between $15 and $20 million investment to get all the remaining lift stations on backup generator. And I think that's our best option. Back to what Jay said, I'm figuring, based on the numbers that were thrown around this morning, and knowing that we would probably also have to invest in a permit, at least a 2-man crew, that all they did every week was go around and test the generators, make sure they cranked up, make sure if there was mechanical issues. Total cumulative cost between the contracts with Yancey or somebody like that and an on-staff crew, probably $500,000 or more a year. So we're talking about some pretty substantial impacts to our capital program, which we all know where we're at on that score. It's a case of we're going to have to really evaluate real closely what the value of putting generators in each one, and even if that's the best technology, which we're leaning towards putting up auxiliary pumps, which don't rely on electrical circuits and being hung on the grid, which exposes them to other dangers during a storm. But it's not a pretty picture if we have to get out there and plug that kind of money, and it will have a substantial impact on rates. I don't know the exact number, but we would be, it's a pass-through if that would be the decision we make.
Excuse me, what is it, how much it's gonna cost to get generators at every pumping station?
Cumulatively, using the figures we were sharing this morning and saying we've got 140 lift stations that don't have them now, approximately, somewhere between 15 and 20 million by the time everything's done.
That's the investment.
That would be the investment up front.
If we decide to go back and do, when we try to put a wastewater station in Brunswick-Glynn, how much would that cost to go back to that?
You mean go back and add one?
Yes.
That's what we're talking about, for the existing stations.
No, I'm not talking about.
Oh, individually?
Something like Academy Creek treatment plant, I'm sorry. That's what I'm gonna say.
Academy Creek, that's a different animal altogether. We've got the 750.
Does it cost that much, as far as 15, 20 million, or what to?
Oh, not for I don't know what it would cost for that individual.
It's apples to
You're
oranges.
asking to put another way.
Yes, because we said, John Water was talking about doing that years ago. Years ago, and then we decided not to do that.
What, generator at every lift station?
No.
Not a new treatment.
Plant.
Another thing is to take-
The North-Glen area.
I'm sorry, Mayor.
And that way, it won't be so, everything should be flowing gravity a lot more than having all these lift stations that we have now. Because they're flowing to flowing south to where it's more towards.
You would not eliminate the lift stations, even with the, if we're talking about the North Mainland treatment plant,
Yeah.
you would still have to pump it.
It's flatter.
We're real flat here.
Oh, it is?
Yes, sir.
We're too
Can't
flat.
Yeah, go lower, I guess.
It just,
So it's not a player.
We can water table so we can, there's no gravity, you can't do it.
we just.
I thought as we go further inland, that it was, higher ground. No?
I don't think it was gonna go far enough inland in Glynn County to work in that. And you're correct, farther inland, you get more gravity because you have more variation in terrain.
You know, you might get local areas around. the
But
plant.
you're not getting much, you still have all these lift stations.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's.
Do we have lift stations that need to be, equipment needs to be completely replaced? Replacement pump?
We don't have any that are looking for total overhauls right now.
So it would just be,
Well, let me correct that. That we've got some that are pretty old and one that's gonna be as part of SPOS. The 4003, we're gonna be eliminating because of its age, but we're going to gravity there. And
So basically what you're saying is you're gonna have to count the cost. We had a storm last year, we had a storm this year. It's like buying inconvenience insurance by buying a lot of generators that may suck up a lot of cash oxygen out of the room that would prevent us from doing other things when we may not have a storm for another 10 years.
So we buy insurance, basically.
Buying insurance is really, really expensive insurance.
So the portable rental units
Exactly, that's what we're doing, you're right.
may be a better option.
And one of the things to keep in mind, to what Commissioner Bowen is saying, that's one of the things I've tried to stress is the fact that, when we talk about spending that kind of money to be, have perfect systems that are out of whack for 24 hours to maybe 3 to 5 days, it's, we can do it. It's just,
Wow,
does that cost benefit make sense?
But your system is in not good shape now. And
No.
When you're pushing
If I
other
had that
stuff through
money-
it, now what you gonna, it's gonna bust somewhere.
Yeah.
If I had the money, I wouldn't plug it into, if I'm weighing the different things that are priority.
You gotta fix what you got before you can fix the other problem.
Yes, sir. I would agree.
Who wants to talk about incident command? Anybody want to talk about incident command?
are gas-driven pumps, turbine-driven pumps used in the wastewater, in the sewage system?
I'm sure
Typically-
they are in some places. We don't have any right now, but I mean, I think they are out there. And certainly, we talked about that this morning, is that, doing auxiliary pumps instead of electrical generators is a backup. A lot of benefits. We were sitting there discussing the reliability of natural gas versus using the diesel. And eventually, we got to the point where we decided that if we were to go that route, or even for a few more stations, in the future, we would go to probably liquid propane storage. I mean, this is real conceptual discussions we had this morning. But we would use auxiliary pumps, liquid propane tanks. Propane tanks could be on-site. Probably the biggest problem with a lot of this that was pointed out to me by some of the staff is, okay, it's a great idea. We got all the money in the world. The genie has suddenly granted us billions and billions of dollars. We can do anything we want. A lot of these stations are on postage stamp lots that we inherited because the subdivisions that built, that's the piece they gave us. If we wanted more real estate to add these assets, have a footprint big enough to house them, we're gonna have to buy a house from somebody at a phenomenal cost to be able to encroach on their properties.
Don't sell that property up on the North Island.
I don't know if a company like Solar Turbines, Solar Turbines is the #1 manufacturer of small gas turbines in the world. And they're owned by Caterpillar. And I don't know if they have a machine that could be retrofitted as a driver, as a mechanical driver for a pump. But be worth asking the question.
But now,
And they can-
we're gonna have to provide methane gas to drive those things?
Yes, well,
Yes.
they have different firing options on their machines, but you wouldn't have to have a generator. You wouldn't have to buy
And what
Caterpillar generator or a Yancey, but one of the components in that analysis would be the differential cost for natural gas versus electricity. The electric company wants you to use electric motors all day long, but the gas company
we
wants
were
you to
talking
burn the
about-
gas.
What we were talking about was an internal combustion engine driven auxiliary pumps.
Right.
We weren't talking about electrical power on these auxiliary pumps.
Okay, well, a third alternative may be a turbine drive that burns natural gas or propane, some other fuel, because there are companies out there that make those
If they're,
to drive pumps and
if we come
compressors.
down to, are they more efficient than?
Well, they'd be more efficient to do it direct. I mean, you only have one conversion. You're not you're not burning natural gas to make electricity and then taking electricity and using it to run a motor and then turning the pump. You're taking a direct drive off of the gas turbine, and you have one combustion process and only one conversion. So it's going to be more efficient. Plus, the natural gas is going to be less expensive than electricity, I think.
We'll do a little bit of research.
Just an idea.
It is. And this one we'll follow up on.
But I hear you, everybody looks so excited to hear about incident command. Okay, so all of our staff, we've talked about this before, preparing for hurricane season used to be academic, and we would have all staff on board taking 2 classes. Two classes that FEMA offers for free, and we're required to all have because it plays into the calculations. Our preparation for hurricane season is looked at when FEMA is determining how much money we're going to get. That's a very elementary way to break it down, but basically if we're not prepared, then we're not doing our part. So our staff maintains typically between 80 and 90% FEMA 100 and 700 compliance, and then there's other classes that we take to advance to another level of preparation. So I want to talk to you just loosely about what we did to prepare for this season, because last year for both Tropical Storm Hermine and Hurricane Matthew, we were adequately staffed for response on the operations side, but we were understaffed, very understrength when it comes to what FEMA refers to as the planning section, logistics section, and the finance administration. So John did speak to the finance side. So 7 finance or admin staff served in this event, but still struggled to keep the paper records up to date daily. A lot of paper is generated. And that paperwork is necessary to facilitate the FEMA reimbursement process. The quicker we get the information to them, the quicker we get money back once there's approval. A pleasant but uncomfortable surprise for us was that the FEMA staff that had already been communicating with Glynn County more or less kind of popped in on us Tuesday morning. And they came in force. There were 5 folks standing at the door wondering what we were going to do with our preliminary damage assessments. We weren't ready yet. We're getting there. So Nisha has already communicated with them, and we're going to be sending our documents to them as quick as we can. But moving on from finance administration into the planning section, we had 5 staff that were led by Todd Klein that were responsible for ensuring that all staff were tasked with missional objectives for each 12-hour incident period. And that was a good number. They were confident that the team that they had for the planning side could get the message out to the crews, and they had briefings every day, actually at the beginning of each period to staff, here's what you're going to go do. Pretty simple. Because it's not business as usual. In one regard, the plant still has to operate, but the rest of the operations staff is standing by prepared to go to do whatever it takes. And this is an emergency event. It's like there's a lot of surprises. The logistics section had 6 staff. They were responsible, led by Pam Crosby, for ensuring that all staff had the proper equipment, were well fed, and had a place to sleep. We needed more of those staff members this year. For what it's worth, and you may have seen that I posted something on social media, that I personally carried a lot of weight of those division or those section leaders on my shoulders last year, and I did a very poor job of it. So I would, after the response to Hurricane Matthew, drive around and hunt down our crews and find out that they've been working for 24 hours straight on a pack of crackers. And that sounds like an exaggeration, but it's true. And that grieved me. So we went into this event, we filled up the truck, we went to Sam's, we got enough food to keep their bellies full. and we had enough cots to make sure that people had rest.
So how many little Debbie's do we have?
We do have some left over. We have some MREs if anybody wants dinner tonight. That meal ready to eat, you ever see that, the brown bag? You can't eat too many of those straight. But interesting thing to note is that even though I say that we did rotate and we didn't have folks working 18-hour shifts that I'm aware of, right? After public safety personnel were drawn in merely hours before the impact of Irma, meaning Dana Reed and I are in the Emergency Operations Center, and the police chief and the fire chief are saying, call your people in. And they shut down public safety. We still had systems pump and maintenance crews that were out preparing the stations, battening down the hatches. And that was necessary because some of the decisions that we made. Following the National Weather Service briefing, in which we were informed, that was the 2 p.m. Sunday briefing that we were all waiting for, we were informed that our district, which covers roughly the area from Jacksonville to Chatham County, was still under hurricane warning and would expect sustained tropical storm force winds. That was our trigger. If we heard that phrase, we were going to do the shutdown on Sunday. We all knew that going into Sunday. Mr. Junkin and I were asked to meet privately with the executive team before going live with the shutdown. So I stood up amongst 200 of my sir.
Would you mind if I cut in on the?
Feel free to go ahead.
We're talking about the 3 o'clock Sunday event.
It was a 2 o'clock briefing. We had published that it was going to be a 2 o'clock shutdown, but you were waiting for my response.
And at the 2 o'clock meeting, at 2 o'clock, as we had indicated, we sent the crews out, began the process. This is one I'm really familiar with, so I'm going to go through this, if Jay doesn't mind.
Okay, right.
We sent the crews out, we started our plan to shut everything down so we wouldn't be energized, so we wouldn't face the consequences of those electrical surges we talked about a while ago, and so that we wouldn't have staff worried or trying to get out there and respond to failures in the system during or immediately after the storm. We were only going to go back when it was safe to go back out. As a result of, as Jay started to say, we were called in, and we had I was actually, we were engaged in a 3 o'clock discussion where we got a personal weather forecast from the NOAA.
The warning meteorologist Al Sandry, National Weather Service, Jacksonville.
The meteorologist, you got it right. But he gave us a fairly rosy picture of what we expected.
If we zoomed in on St. Simon's
If we zoomed in on St. Simon, Jekyll Island, and the fringe of Glynn County and Brunswick, we got this nice, we're going to be about 40, 45, which is, at that boundary line between a tropical storm wind and something less. With that information, there was clearly a desire not to shut down the assets. There was enough, I think, public outcry over the short duration, and we were going to leave the water system on. So let me get this straight now. This was only the sewer assets that were really getting pressure on. And the pressure from the public and from maybe some of the media, radio people was, why are we going to be shutting this down kind of thing. Well, we looked at it, and because of the rosy weather forecast, I rescinded the plan that we had initially put out there. And I keep myself now because I feel like we should have stayed the course. I should have been more conservative in my thinking, because the weatherman had even himself said at every briefing, this is what it says right now. This is our best guess. This could change radically. It could be real different. Words to heed. I didn't heed his own words in listening to his last words. And we will not make that mistake again. And I think anybody on the executive committee that were there in the EOC would back me up on this. We're not going to make that mistake again. We won't have our people out there in the storm. When the rest of public safety stands down, we'll stand down. We're going to even look into the expense of remotely turning off our equipment and cutting ties with the grid to keep from being involved in any of the kind of issues that might be if you stay online or even connected to the grid. That's one of those tough learning lessons, but for sure, we risk some of our own people. We're going to incur probably low six-figure damages as a result. We know that we delayed, if it hadn't been for the power being out, we would have delayed access or function of those assets in some cases a fair amount while we had to make repairs or at least temporary repairs. So there's a number of downsides to not having followed the plan, which wasn't an original plan. It's typical of, I understand, a lot of the hurricane or the coastal communities and utilities that face such efforts. With that, I'll turn it back over to Jay, but I will say we're going to follow that plan pretty closely, and I think we'll have a lot of support to do so. One of the other things we're going to be looking at, I know there was 2 or 3 real critical water users that were pressing us to keep the water systems on. And we're going to be looking at specific projects in the next 12 months to make sure that those facilities are have standalone backup reserves to take care of themselves if they decide to stick it out through a hurricane event again. You know, it's one of those, it's a tough decision. I would hate to be in their shoes and have to make that decision to stay, but in the last 2 years, each time critical facilities at the jail and at the hospital, they've had to stay. It's a tough thing to do, but we think there's some fairly reasonable economic projects we could do to get them reliable and have them able to sustain operations and continually have water throughout the, without us endangering any of our, or maintaining and running our assets. The only other thing was we talked about as staff that it looks like the Brunswick High School is going to be the new staging area for public safety to get to where the people that stayed through the storm that are going to have to get out there and deal with things as soon as it's over. We're going to look at doing a similar project for the high school to make sure that it maintains water through an event like that without us having to keep our stuff cranked up. But beyond that, that's the really only the big stuff I had on assets being run through the storm.
I have just a few more minutes of information for you. So let's Joy comes in the morning. Let's make a negative into a positive. Going into this storm, Georgia Power had limited resources available. On the night of the event, they had 5 people in Glynn County ready to respond. The next day, they had 200 people. I wish Dana were here to back up the numbers. You guys have heard these numbers too. And then they were to add the next day 100 people because everybody was in Middle Georgia. So they had staged their staff in an area that ended up getting hit. The storm was very unpredictable. It was that unpredictable. That's a blessing for us though, because then we had a long lull on Monday where we had our staff able to go shut systems down so they wouldn't come up. Now you see we were able to switch into what we wanted to do on Sunday afternoon come Monday morning, and we were turning systems off. However, we were finding damages in the process. Nevertheless, Glynn County Manager Alan Hours, at the first briefing Monday morning following the storm, made all public works staff available to clear the way for us to stand services back up as quickly as possible. And we received immediate and significant help from the Glynn County Public Works Director, Dave Austin, who was sitting 2 seats over from me. So it's helpful to be in that area where we can have that kind of partnership and that communication. Rick Charnock was sitting next to me, and it's unfortunate that he left because I wanted to give him some love. City of Brunswick did the same thing. They said, okay, whatever you guys need, just tell us. So they focused their initial efforts in clearing streets purely based on our list of priorities getting the systems back up. That was very helpful. So we could get there and shut down before the power started popping back up. Sometimes in and out of phase, left, right, up, down, that kind of thing. Data communications went down on the email side, and some of you noticed that as soon as it happened. We left our servers going because we didn't expect to have the storm surge here that would have taken out the servers, so we left it going as long as it could, and at some point we had a generator running, but we're going to be pursuing alternative methods for email, such as moving our email system to a cloud-based system that Microsoft offers called Office 365. The city uses that. The city never lost their email because it's up there. It's in the cloud. County, same story. So we're unique in that regard, so that might be something we do next. And Verizon service, just like the last two storms, was very reliable. There were some notable exceptions, but some of that's internal that we need to sort out. Radio communications would have been weak if needed, as we only had the one Motorola two-way radio that we purchased prior to Hurricane Matthew, and that was intended to just allow our incident commander, Mr. Junkin, to communicate with the EOC. So the Emergency Operations Center has those radios all about. We've put 6 of those on order, so Hastings Communications is going to get those to us, hopefully, before the next named storm, or actually, let's say we're never going to have one in our lifetime. But if we do have one, we'll be prepared, and then we'll have those radios, a total of 7 now, in daily use for the crews that, perhaps flagmen, that need to be able to communicate between the crew. We're going to need to have 4 staff in our Emergency Operations Center. Last year, Todd and I were walking in with more or less the same skill set, and we did our best to alternate times. This year, Dana Reed and I walked in with completely different skill sets. Valuable skill sets, but we were both unique in what we were doing. Because of that fact, we were never able to rotate, so we spent the week serving 24-hour shifts, and that led to fatigue between the two of us. But it's tough for me to complain about that because we were sitting on our butts in an air-conditioned room getting fed regularly. And I know our guys had a lot more trouble going on in the field, so they get the kudos. But we needed 2 GIS analysts rotating in shifts for asset outage analysis, and 2 public information officers for interagency and community communications. Dana's role in this was to get the word from the field and what systems were up and what systems were down, and then prioritize with Georgia Power, who was 6-8 feet away, and their 2 reps, and communicate with their staff. So it worked really well. Pretty powerful partnership, and that's why we all come together. Actually, most of those people in the room during an event spend at least an hour to 2 hours together as part of the local emergency planning committee. So I go to that every month. Dana started going to that with me. The visual products that we generated, you saw be posted on the web eventually, but initially they were only internal. But we started realizing the value of having those pie charts and the outage map that shows the dots. It's kind of a useless tool if you want to see if your house is with or without sewer service, but it was a valuable tool for the decision makers. It drove the decision-making process amongst the executive team, the elected officials, and the other agencies that were represented there. Mr. Junkin should have been our agency liaison, not our incident commander. So I was putting all the pieces in place as the planner weeks before the event or the week of, and we plugged Mr. Junkin and Kirk Young in as alternating incident commanders. And all that would mean is, from an incident command standpoint, if you walk down the hall and there's a bucket of paint spilled over, you're everything. You take care of the bucket of paint, you clean it up, you go on with your business. But as incident command grows, we build strengths in those areas so that they make more sense and we can be most effective. Mr. Junkin really was needed for a time in the Emergency Operations Center. I obviously, you've heard the kudos, and I want to be humble and say that I did the best I could do, but I believe it would have been more effective to have Mr. Junkin there. And primarily because whenever I stepped away from the desk thank you, Mr. Mayor. He was actually there seeing, he knew my struggle. And as I stepped away from the desk, there were 911 operators running up to the desk constantly with situations, sanitary sewer overflows, other agencies that were trying to get our attention. And it's difficult to step away for a long period of time, so we may need to stage Mr. Junkin in the Emergency Operations Center next time on an uncomfortable cot. Following Hurricane Matthew, by the way, we were able to justify delaying reentry 2 days due to the significant service outages. And I believe that we were under pressure by our citizens to reopen the gates too early, and I hope that everyone understands that we were aware of the significant hazards to public health, and those existed before they returned, they existed when they returned. We knew that. And it's a fact that I believe that we communicated effectively, but I think that people are still uncomfortable with the idea that they were coming into town with what seemed to be a third world country. No power, no sewer, no water in some cases. Well, restricted water. We never issued a boil water advisory, by the way, not once. Jekyll Island did. In Jekyll Island, we ran, they were 4 feet from me, right in front of me, and we communicated effectively on the methods that we were going to go through, and they tried to have the same processes, so it was helpful. Overall, I'd say our report of how effectively we responded to the event was very positive. We learned a lot following Matthew, and we've learned a lot now following Irma. We're not a very big organization, but we accomplished some big things despite some intense operational challenges. We had over 80 staff members that I know love this community and made a sacrifice to ensure that our community had a place to call home, to return to, and services available for them when they got here. Any questions?
Gentlemen?
I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
But I also have a comment, and you've probably heard me use the term local heroes. I would love to hear see our news media helping us with the image that we literally have local heroes right here in this organization. You described it. You have hundreds of people showing up with hundreds of trucks from the power companies.
Oh, yes.
And we have tens of trucks and tens of people to take care of the system for 30,000 customers.
Yes, sir.
It's what a comparison. And we've got to keep up with them and the way that they want to energize their system from the feed out, which is completely understandable. I understand that. And the way that we need to energize our system from the wastewater treatment plant back.
Yes.
Those are a lot of times opposing one another in those directions. So there's coordination. We really do have local heroes in our organization, and the public. I'd love for the public to know about that, and we might want to consider who some of those people are and give some recognition.
I could make a list.
And another question that I had, I heard a lot about. We didn't shut the system down, so we then had to go out and shut lift stations down. I'm wondering, have we considered any sort of remote isolation?
I tried to make that point earlier. We're actually going to look into some means to remotely do that.
So what this proposed or upcoming SCADA improvements would allow you to do that?
Well, I mean, yeah, the SCADA would, but that won't isolate you from the grid. We're going to need a little bit more than just SCADA capabilities. SCADA will let you turn the motors off. If there's somewhere to zap down through, you're still online.
We may be able to buy, I don't know what the cost would be for those remote switching. Could be inside, or it could potentially be something that Georgia Power would buy for us and put outside the fence.
Wouldn't that be great?
We can always ask them.
Yeah. We got a friend, Paolo, Albuquerque.
Yeah.
Could be as simple as the neighbor next door.
There you go.
Any other questions,
Run out and pull
gentlemen?
that lever. Trust me, it's okay.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you much. Well, Mr. Executive Director?
I'll try to be brief. I know it's been a long afternoon, but two
I don't
things.
think we ever had a meeting this long.
Oh, yes. Two things to go over real quickly. First, to let you know, we talked about the aged accounts that we've been working on. When we first brought it up and had the policy modified so that we could, our collections policy modified so that we could kind of go after some of these long-term, high-dollar aged accounts. We had almost $2 million in 60-day plus aged accounts. As of today's accounting, we're at 300 and, let me get my numbers out here, 349,000 and some change that has been collected. Another 67,000 are lined up on the promissory notes that will, will be collected here in the next several months. So that leaves us with approximately $1.6 million that hadn't been collected, but we're still working aggressively to get after that money. But we're making good headway on it. The only other thing I had to report today was I wanted to introduce our new Deputy Director, Andrew Burris. He's come in today, and I'm just going to read a quick introductory statement. Man, I hate phones. Basically, the statement I prepared was, the Brunswick-Glynn County Joint Water and Sewer Commission proudly announces the selection and hiring of Andrew Burris to fill the position of Deputy Executive Director for the BGJWSC. Mr. Burris is a graduate of Chemical and Biological Engineering from the University of Alabama. He is a licensed professional engineer in this field. Mr. Burris worked in the Alabama Department of Environmental Management doing stormwater permitting before going to work as Process Assets Manager for the City of Tuscaloosa. In that role, Mr. Burris was responsible for water and wastewater treatment and conveyance operations. Through a variety of process and operational improvements that he initiated in that role, Mr. Burris was responsible for reducing annual operating costs by at least $850,000 per year and an additional $350,000 per year once the current NPDES permit modification is approved. He has extensive experience in capital projects management and organizational change. All these attributes will be essential in his role as the BGJWSC implements a future vision of providing the highest level of customer service at the lowest cost achievable. Welcome aboard.
So that's your speech.
He can fly, but we're not going to demonstrate that today. The red S on his chest is going to be covered.
I would have been here sooner, but y'all wouldn't let me back in the county.
I think I figured out how the next one's gonna go. You'll be at Academy Creek? You can sleep all the time.
Don't know, maybe.
Okay.
That's all I
Is that all? Do we need an executive session?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay. I have nothing to add. It's been a long day. Commissioners?
A long day, sir. It's been a good meeting. We accomplished a lot of things and good update on Hurricane Irma. I'm sure other things will be coming out about this as well. A good decision that was made by the executive staff. I did commend Jay for being in the EOC.
Thanks, sir.
He had to make some critical decisions, and the fact that he knew that he had that responsibility, and that this board would back him, really was crucial to some decisions he made. He kept saying stay the course, and then other people were jumping on him about you need to change, you need to change, you need to change. So I really felt proud that he was there. However, by a certain number of days, he was gradually failing. So, Mr. Junkin, by you being there, probably be a good thing. That's all I got, sir.
Okay.
Here again, I just want to thank everybody that worked hard. You know how much it's appreciated. And I hear it out there from everybody. People call, and I've had people tell me personally how well. So I thank you.
Well, that's just for your information. They had a class on it, and they left it for us. Okay. All right. Meeting's adjourned.